Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto X Marvel harem in Marvel Universe. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by SCARLETAESIR058 and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. I hate magic. It makes no sense to me, so it utterly irritates me, but I also love it cause of the wonder and mystery revolving around it. That said, if I was to pick between magic and chakra, I would choose chakra every time cause once you understand it, there really isn't anything you can't do. Naruto Uzumaki. Waking up from cryogenic stasis was a bitch, Naruto Uzumaki would soon conclude. Especially when you had a regenerative healing factor and a body that actively fought the whole process going in. His captors had even claimed that they were deliberately freezing him at a far lower temperature than was normal just to combat his regeneration and spite him for his troublesomeness. Was that even a word? In the end, the whole process did not do good things for his body cells. Which was why Naruto's eyes were currently stinging like a bitch along with the rest of his body as he thawed. Keeping them shut due to the pain took away one of his senses, but then he already couldn't taste, smell or feel anything either. Those senses were all completely numb. However, his ears, despite throbbing fiercely, could at least make out something resembling sounds from his surrounding. Nothing truly distinct, and if he was to use a comparison, it was like listening to already muffled sound underwater, but it was still distinctly sound. Which meant one of his regular senses was working even if not properly. Despite his poor condition, Naruto Uzumaki was just happy he was finally free of that kami-forsaken prison for however long he would retain that freedom this time. It was not the first time he had been brought out of cryo by these evil scientists that would have been best pals with Orochimaru, and it likely wouldn't be the last. However, Naruto fully intended to make sure he didn't go back into that hellish contraption willingly. Not that he ever did go in there willingly to begin with, but he intended to put up more of a fight this time. Hurled in a fetal position on the floor where he had fallen after being released, Naruto was garbed in nothing more than some skin-tight sports boxers to preserve his modesty. As he slowly regenerated in that state, he was far from being capable of even moving, let alone doing anything else at 100% functionality. However, the scientist at this facility had done something to him and somehow accelerated his healing ability. Naruto could literally feel it and it scared him. Cells which had exploded due to being frozen at temperatures far below 0 degrees Celsius, thawed due to his higher than normal body temperature, repairing themselves and putting his body back together. Which meant in a few minutes he would be physically at 100%, and those that had done this to him would all be in a lot of pain if they hadn't drugged him to high hell by then. Still, his captors weren't idiots and knew better than to release him from his cage without safeguards. They were still rebuilding several labs from the first and last time they had been careless with him, and he'd gone on a rampage as he attempted to escape. Which was why Naruto wondered to himself. What was going on here? Surely they can't be this stupid. Hey, are you alright? Ah. He thought. It seemed his hearing had finally kicked in enough so that he could not only differentiate words being spoken from white noise, but understand what was actually being said, and that the voice speaking to him was that of a female. Grunting in a failed attempt at a response due to his vocal cords still thawing only earned him a concerned. Easy, easy. You just came out of cryo, it's disorienting and painful, but I promise I will help you get out of here. Why? Naruto wondered to himself as he lay there regenerating. It had been weeks since he was first brought to the facility from what he could gather each time they brought him out of cryo, 7 weeks to be exact. Yet in that whole time he had been held captive and frequently experimented on, not once had he met a single individual in this facility who was willing to show him even an inkling of compassion and human decency. Instead, they had cut him open with wide grins as they plundered the secrets of his body and mind in hopes of replicating them to improve upon their Weapon X program, whatever the hell that was. It was the highest physical violation a shinobi can endure and the reason hunter nin squads existed in the elemental nations. Hell, Konoha and Bu, who were too badly injured to complete the mission, willingly immolated themselves to preserve the secrets of their bodies. As for Naruto, he felt very violated and someone would pay for that. So it naturally begged the questions. Why was someone suddenly claiming they would help get him out of this hellhole? Why was this person showing kindness towards him, and he could feel that it was genuine kindness through his negative sensing ability, when for the past 5 weeks all he had known was pain, humiliation and indignity from his captors. In the end, he concluded that the only way to get the answers he wanted was to open his eyes and look for himself into the eyes of the woman who claimed she would help him. So, risking the pain that would come from the brightness of the room as he opened his eyes that had yet to fully regenerate from being frozen, he laid his gaze on his would-be savior and his mind went blank. Apparently his eyes were a lot more healed than he thought. Hami, she's gorgeous. A stray thought had sprung to the forefront of his mind of its own will, and yet he couldn't find it in himself to deny its truth. He had seen plenty of great beauties in his homeland: Mei, Tsunade, Yugao, Yujito, Hinata, Karen, Ino, Anko, Mabui, Raizetsu and many more. Even his own mother and Sasuke's for that matter could be described as babes, not that he entertained such thoughts of his mother, but it was still an undeniable fact. Yet this girl was different. Her breast size was not even as large as half the above-mentioned women, and yet it suited her physique perfectly and enhanced her. She wasn't very tall at 5'1", but her lithe figure had the type of musculature that one could only get through intensive workout on a nearly daily basis and proportions that were simply perfect for her. Her skin was a darker tone that indicated a lot of exposure to the sun, and Naruto did a double take when his gaze swept over her hips and ass, which were undeniable sexy as hell. She did not look like some ethereal goddess like so many of the women he had known in his homeland, but perhaps that was what made her so much more fetching to his eye. That and the fact she had just saved him from his personal frozen hell. He couldn't resist noting how her form-hugging black top, pants and heeled boots did nothing but enhance how sexy she looked. And yes, he was a bit of a pervert, but the world needed to be praising the log that he wasn't worse considering Jiraiya of the Sannin had been his master. However, he still had the presence of mind to note her straight raven hair and jade eyes. Eyes so full pain, regret and hope mixed together. Eyes that reminded himself of every time he looked in the mirror when he was younger. They were beautiful. Beautiful. Naruto most certainly did not mean to say that out loud, seeing as his vocal cords were supposed to still be repairing themselves, so when she blushed and looked to the side, he had no idea to how resolve the awkward atmosphere he had just created. Or at least do it properly, but then again this was Uzumaki Naruto we were talking about, so he decided to bull his way through the awkwardness and simply change the subject. I am Naruto Uzumaki. Nice to meet you. He said, extending his right hand only to realize with no small amount of surprise that he actually had a right hand. I thought Kagaya chopped that off below the elbow. It certainly wasn't their last time these assholes brought me out of cryo. The girl eyed his extended arm for a second as if it was a snake threatening to bite her before taking the hand in her own and shaking it as she calmly replied. X-23, we need to move. We are not safe here. Caught off guard by her name, he couldn't help but blurt out. X-23. The hell kind of name is that? Let it not be said that Naruto was not his mother's son. Quick to speak and impulsive to a fault. He'd improved over the years as he took on various responsibilities, but he was still very much an Uzumaki at his core. The people who captured you and have been experimenting on you created me years ago and designated me X-23. The 23rd experimental clone to replicate the abilities of my father, the original Weapon X. She explained without a care in the world. Naruto paused in surprise at her blunt revelation before saying. Yeah, I gathered my captors were a bunch of dicks, but that's just not right. Don't you have another name I can call you? It was the girl's turn to pause in surprise, more so at the fact that Naruto still had some sense of morality than anything else after being the facility's plaything for a while. Still, she replied. My mother named me Laura Kinney. Perfect. Naruto said with a wide grin showing his sparkling teeth as he memorized the strange name. It was a strange world he'd found himself in, so strange names came with the territory. It's nice to meet you, Laura, now let's get out of here. I think I've healed enough to move. Began Laura, seemed to get caught off guard by his comment as he rose to his feet, eventually asking. You can regenerate. Are you another clone? For a moment Naruto thought of the thousands of clones he once could make using the shadow clone jutsu he was famous for, but dismissed it, already knowing that the way she used the word was very different from the way he and his people did. No, I've always been able to heal quickly, but I think they enhanced that or something. I am healing faster than normal, and my right hand seems to have reground somehow. She looked at his hand in curiosity before asking. Did they cut it off? Naruto merely chuckled as he recalled exactly how he lost his right arm before replying. Nope, I lost that in a fight with some stupid goddess. With that he headed for the door, heedless of the incredulous look his savior was giving him as she followed, and soon the duo were out of the lab he had been held in. VVV. Julian Calaracahelion knew he'd fucked it up with Laura. He knew it the minute that she begged him to kill Kimura, and he'd said no. Whatever mutual attraction the two had been feeling for each over the past few weeks since he'd saved her from Nimrod was suddenly replaced by betrayal. She felt as if his actions by choosing to let the psychotic woman live had betrayed her in some deep, profound way. Unfortunately, he could not understand why this was, and perhaps he did not want to. It had been a long night already, and his eyes had been opened to a side of Laura that he had never seen before. The side that reminded you that she was every bit the clone of Wolverine she claimed to be, and a killer to boot. His teammate Cecily Kincaid aka Mercury had been kidnapped by an evil organization that X-23 referred to simply as the Facility. These people were the same ones that had created Laura to be a living weapon, and apparently they had been the ones to experiment on Wolverine 2 years ago and bond his skeleton with adamantium. In short, these people intended to do bad things to his teammate Mercury, so Hellion and X-23 were in a race against time to save her. Which was why they had struck at the hideouts of numerous little gangs with connections to the facility or connections to someone who was in turn connected to the facility in some way. It didn't even matter how remote the connection was, the duo had visited every single one of those individuals for information. Unfortunately, each and every time Julian tried to kick the bad guys' teeth in to get the information out of them. Laura on the other hand had absolutely no qualms with straight up gutting these people for answers. In short, she was more than willing to kill or dismember quite a number of bad guys for the information she wanted. As far as she was concerned when it came to these people, it was kill or be killed, pure and simple. Over and over Julian had repeated to Laura like a mantra that the X-Men did not kill, and she would listen for a moment and seemingly consider his words. However, when they got to the next location, she would ignore his words and do something that could potentially kill one or all of the people they were shaking down for information. Oftentimes Hellion was the very one saving the lives of the bad guys from X-23 as she took playing the bad cop to a whole new level. One thug that she had thrown out of a 12th-story building window came to mind after he had failed to give her answers. Lucky for the thug, Julian was telekinetic. Hell, Julian had even watched her shoot a man in the head in cold blood that very night, right after the man had truthfully given them all the information he had on the facility. Not that it was much. Still, after witnessing all that, Hellion just couldn't look at her the same, and it all came to a head when they had been ambushed by Kimura and he had successfully countered that ambush and pinned Kimura to a wall with his telekinesis. Laura had then begged him to end Kimura's life with tears in her eyes, and he had said no. In that moment Julian had watched something inside of her, some kind of faith in him, snuff out. It was heartbreaking for him, but he already knew he would make the same decision again if it was thrust on him. However, this also meant that whatever the two of them had had together these past weeks, since the Nimrod incident, was now over. After tonight, nothing between them would ever be the same, and it was killing him. He just wasn't a killer, well, X-23 very much was, and in his mind you couldn't be a killer and good person at the same time. Yet Hellion still found her so attractive. Sighing as he made his way through the secret facility's many labs, ripping doors open and taking down guards wherever he encountered them, he headed for the location X-23 had pointed out Cecily was located at. Saving his teammate was the mission after all, and it took precedence over everything he was dealing with emotionally. VVV. Naruto, why did you stop? Naruto looked at his pretty rescuer when she called his name. His attention had been drawn momentarily to the spike in negative emotions he sensed in various places in the facility, and he had unknowingly stopped the quick jog through the facility. Replying honestly, he said, "Your friend is in great pain up ahead. I can feel it and it's kind of distracting. However, I can also sense more life forms in that room." With his explanation given, Laura frowned for a moment before nodding as she said, "One of them is probably Hellion. I sent him ahead to rescue Mercury while I investigated the lab you were in. I am positive he got to her by now, and he's strong enough to handle almost anything the facility could throw at him." The explanation was simple, but from Naruto's frown, Laura could tell that the ninja knew there was more to it than that. It didn't take a genius to figure out that while in the midst of rescue mission, one doesn't just veer of course and investigate a random lab when their friend is in danger without there being some kind of story behind it. Either Laura had the utmost confidence in this Hellion's abilities or she had other reasons for doing so. Laura, however, was just grateful that Naruto didn't press the issue, choosing instead to say, "Your friend Hellion might be in there, but he is not alone. I can sense 4 other life signs in there and 3 of them don't feel completely human. I think both of your friends might be in danger." Worry finally made its way into Laura's facial expression as she said, "Then I better hurry in case they need me. Do you want to wait here? I can double back for you after I take care of the threat." Naruto felt touched that this girl was concerned about his well-being. Enough that she was giving him the option of staying out of any ensuing fight, but that only made him all the more determined to fight at her side, even if he was as weak as shit at the moment. "No, I think I've regained enough strength for some combat. Let's keep moving. You seem experienced in combat. Aside from your regeneration, do you have any other abilities or skills? I need to know what you are capable to better coordinate with you in the coming fight." Startled, Naruto looked at Laura in surprise as she eyed him up and down. He was pretty positive that she was very experienced in combat and she had the eyes of a killer. However, he didn't expect her to be able to tell the same about him so easily, nor did he expect her to be tactician. A strategist, eh? Brilliant. Naruto mirthfully responded before explaining. "I am a ninja skilled in ninjutsu, taijutsu, shuriken jutsu and fuinjutsu." Laura scrunched her face up in confusion at the terms and asked, "Can you clarify what you mean with those words?" "I am not a ninja." Still, she knew enough to know that if he was really a ninja, then he was a force to be reckoned with, provided he had any skill in these arts he was listing, of course. Sorry, ninjutsu is well civilians always called it ninja magic. I know many different types of techniques in this field, though I don't have access to most of them right now. Taijutsu is just physical combat, but more so hand-to-hand combat. Shuriken jutsu is the art of hitting targets with thrown weapons like shuriken, kunai or senbon for example, which are ninja throwing stars, ninja knives and ninja throwing needles respectively, but there is more to it. Jutsu or the sealing arts is a bit harder to explain, it's kind of like ninjutsu, except you write symbols that command reality for various effects. And all this is powered by an energy we call chakra. Naruto quickly explained before making a Rasengan in his left hand, showing it to her saying. This is chakra. Laura's surprise was palpable as she beheld the spiraling ball of blue energy known as the Rasengan in Naruto's hand. It felt powerful and dangerous to her instincts, like something she should avoid getting hit by at any cost, unless she wanted to be in a world of pain. Naruto's apparently more powerful than he seemingly appears. She thought to herself as she said. Ah, I see. I can tell just by looking that technique is quite dangerous, but I am more surprised that you even told me as much as you have about what you can do. Looking her straight in the eyes, Naruto simply replied with a calm and confidence that was simultaneously unnerving and inspiring. I trust you. You don't know anything about me. Laura rebutted with a frown on her face. How could he say that about her, they'd only just met a few minutes ago. Naruto merely looked up at the ceiling with a whimsical smile, as if seeing something that she could not fathom, and replied. I know enough. I am a killer. Why, she said that Laura had no idea. She found Naruto interesting and his company pleasant. She also felt giddy at the prospect that she was trusted by him, even though they barely knew each other. She'd been seeking the trust of her fellow mutants ever since Logan had dragged her back to the X-Mansion, and slowly she had earned that trust. However, it had been an uphill battle all the way, and yet this guy was so willing to just trust her after knowing her for less than 30 minutes. Common sense said that Naruto had an agenda and he should not be trusted at all. Her feelings had been betrayed so many times in the past by people claiming they trusted her and asking for her trust in turn that she found herself desperate to test and see whether his words were genuine. Laura was not just any mutant, but Wolverine's clone, and one of the powers they shared in common was the ability to detect lies. And yet Naruto was not lying. He really believed what he was saying from what she could tell with her heightened senses. He really trusted her. It was such a pure and innocent action that she couldn't help but try and dissuade him from doing so without at least knowing a little about her. She could practically feel a sort of kinship with him radiating of the deed as he looked at her, and in that moment she understood. Where the insight came from Laura would never know, but in that moment as she stared into his single unblinking amethyst eye could see it as plain as day. Naruto was the same as her, a living weapon used by others for their own ends. Some of those people were noble and others malicious, but in the end they had all used them. So when he calmly replied. I know that too. But you are also a good person, or at least you are trying to be a good person. That has to count for something. Laura knew it was the truth. They were the words his surrogate big brother and former sensei Hada Kakashi had told him after he found out what was being done to him and how he was being used by Root. Those words, a whole lot of training, some Yamanaka counseling sessions and a lot of unconditional love are what had saved him from the hell of his old life. And just like they had left him stunned back then and prepared to reevaluate his whole life, the same words did so once more as Laura replied, how can you tell? His answer was to spread his hands out and indicate his surrounding while saying. Are we not rushing to save your friends right now? It's not exactly the kind of thing a bad person would do, nor was releasing me from my confinement, Laura. Naruto then turned to look Laura straight in the eye and said with words borrowed from Kakashi himself. Besides, I am a killer too, but I was first taught how to be a good person. A lesson I don't doubt that you can learn with ease. Thank you. Laura stuttered, showing a bit more vulnerability than she was accustomed to. To which Naruto merely beamed at her and said. No problem, now let's go save your friends. VVV. Perhaps it was the fact that Laura had gone her own way that made Hellion so cautious when he first entered the lab holding Mercury. Nevertheless, he was grateful that he had put up a telekinetic dome around himself and the device imprisoning his teammate. If he hadn't done so, he would definitely have been chow for one of the canine-like monstrosities currently attacking him, if not for all three. Even now it was taking everything Julian had to keep them out as the silvery-skinned beasts battered themselves against the TK dome he put up. They looked like dogs, really big dogs with lots of muscle towards the front of their torsos. Even on all fours they were larger than the average man, and their teeth looked like they could shear through bone with relative ease. However, what made them so terrifying to him, what struck fear into the rebel heart of the young man called Hellion, was not their roars, their size, their speed or their strength, but rather their skin. Hellion knew that skin anywhere, seeing as it belonged to his teammate and dear friend Mercury. Julian Keller honestly found himself terrified at the prospect of learning exactly what had been done to Cecily Kincaid to create these nightmare creatures. When Laura called these people in the facility monsters and described their experimentation and torturous procedures, it hadn't registered with him. It wasn't until he'd seen it for himself that Julian Keller understood exactly what they were up against. That he understood what it was the facility did to mutants like him. That he could understand that Mercury, who had been their captive for a day, had been so brutally tortured that she could barely keep herself in a coherent shape and would have nightmares of her time here for the rest of her life. Yet X-23 had been the plaything of these monsters for years. It made Julian's blood boil as he was forced to acknowledge and understand another piece of the puzzle that was Laura Kinney. Just as he felt he was at his limits holding back the silvery predators trying to eat him, one of the door to the lab they were in blew open and in stepped a welcome sight, along with a very confusing one. X-23, who was the welcome sight, stood in the doorway with all four of the claws in her arms extended and ready for combat, while besides her stood a bewildered and mostly naked Redeed, save for a pair of sports boxers to preserving his modesty. If anyone asked, Julian would deny it to hell and back, but he couldn't help in that moment, feeling irrationally jealous of how close the half-naked teen was standing next to X-23. Especially since the bastard was so goddamn good-looking, even with barely any clothing on. Now Julian wasn't gay or anything, he just couldn't deny that the boy simply knew how to pull off the gravity-defying spiky scarlet hair, look like a professional model, and make the hair work for him. A few locks of his scarlet hair covered the teen's left eye like an eye patch, keeping it from view, but his right eye was a vibrant amethyst that seemed to glow in the low-light conditions of the lab. Then there was his ridiculously ripped six-pack, hell, all his muscles, while not big and bulky, looked so well-defined that they could have been made out of some kind of living marble, rather than flesh and blood, for all the difference it would have made. The only blemish he could see on the other boy's healthy peach skin, if one could even consider it a blemish, were the three whisker-like marking on each of his cheek that gave him a foxish appearance for some reason. Whether they were tattoos or birthmarks, Julian couldn't tell. Speaking of tattoos, there was a strange flame-like red tattoo on his left shoulder and some tribal-like pattern around the wrist of that same arm. This boy also didn't seem to give two shits about the temperature, which was pretty chilly that evening, or the monsters that had been attacking Julian until he and X-23 busted in. If anything, he seemed more bewildered by Laura's extended claws, seeing as he was hanging uncomfortably close to her and closely scrutinizing them. Suppressing the pang of jealousy Julian felt at this, he simply called out to his teammate asking, "Laura, who is this?" "Naruto Uzumaki." Before she could even reply, the Redeed introduced himself with a weak grin as he turned his attention to Julian and Mercury before looking to the three creatures that were in turn giving him their entire focus. Honestly, the stare-off between the Redeed and these monsters felt like two different predators had suddenly met and were sizing each other up. Laura, who was also keeping a keen eye on the creatures, chipped in. "They were experimenting on him, so I freed him." That was a surprise. Of course he knew that she had originally left his side because she was pissed at him for not killing Kimura and needed something to do. Still. How do you know you can trust him? It was a legitimate question, even if it was one born of slight jealousy towards Naruto Uzumaki and his sheer masculinity. "We can discuss that later, Hellion, just know that I do trust him for the now." Laura's comment seemed to surprise the Redeed, who grinned widely at her before turning his attention back on the predators. "That said, what's important right now is saving Mercury and dealing with these things. More guards are coming from the north and the west." 8:01:52. The strange Redeed finally deigned to speak again, the whole time never taking his eyes of the silver dog creatures. VVV. The former section commander of Anbu Black Ops Teams Rho, Rand, Han and Co. kept his eyes fixed on the silver canine-like creatures before him. Naruto had blasted them with a mild amount of killing intent from the moment he first spotted them, strong enough to appear a threat and force the silver hounds to keep their attention solely on him, but weak enough that they didn't panic and scatter. In his opinion, those beasts needed to die. Now that he was up close with them, he could sense how wrong their life force felt to his chakra senses, a result of the fact that they were artificially engineered. They were nothing but rabid monsters to him, and through his negative emotion sensing ability, he could feel their bloodlust and endless desire to kill. It was also a desire they would act on the minute he looked away and displayed a moment of presumed weakness. Rabid monsters though they were, these silver hounds were still clever predators. They were weak predators compared to some of the beings he had tangoed with in the past, but predators nonetheless. "Do you know how many?" Laura asked in response to his earlier declaration about enemy reinforcements. Naruto did not turn his gaze away from the silver predators to check or to respond to Laura, but then he didn't have to when his left eye, hidden behind his scarlet bangs, could see through walls and spot everything around him for kilometers around. Yes, Naruto had the Byakugan, an eye he had been gifted by his late lover Hyuga Hinata after she'd been impaled through the heart by Uchiha Madara as the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails. He still couldn't control its power very well, especially since it wasn't even a remotely normal Byakugan to begin with. Still, Naruto had always been pretty talented at getting around those kinds of handicaps. So instead of using the Byakugan's full omnidirectional vision for 1 kilometer of localized near omniscience, Naruto merely focused in a single direction with the telescopic vision aspect of the Byakugan. With the assistance of his chakra and emotion sensing abilities to detect what directions enemies might be coming from, it allowed him to focus solely on what he wanted to focus on, rather than on simply seeing everything around him. Even with all his experience assimilating the memories and knowledge of thousands of clones at a time, the sheer amount of information the Byakugan granted when active was daunting. This would have to do until he could learn to properly control the powerful eye. About 43, 10 from the north, the rest form the west. Explained, referring to the other 2 of the 3 entrances to this particular lab. Laura nodded in understanding before humming to herself in thought and saying. Then we need to deal with these creatures quick. I presume you are the one keeping them in check. Yes. Naruto quietly responded before adding. Those 3 bitches will attack as soon as I look away or one of us makes an aggressive move. I will strike first and attempt to capture them, follow behind me and decapitate them with your claws once I've captured them. Laura looked at him in surprise for a second before replying acknowledged. ETA 50 seconds. Naruto said, deliberately breaking his gaze with the silver predators, something they took as a sign to attack. However, before they could even make it 1 meter forward, Naruto seemingly faded from where he was standing next to Laura and materialized next to the middle predator of the 3, which he could heard. It was like a cannon had gone off as his foot crashed into the beast's mercury-covered chest and launched it away from him at speeds one could only describe as supersonic. Unfortunately, Naruto just happened to punt the oversized dog through one of the few windows in the facility leading to the outside. Oh shit. That was not supposed to happen. Naruto thought in shock as he looked at his leg in wonder. His chakra levels were barely above minimum capacity and his reserves were not refilling as fast as he would like, and yet he'd just moved far faster than he had ever done without the aid of chakra, whether sage, tailed beast or 6 paths chakra. Hell, he'd kicked the predator he'd attacked with the kind of force he'd normally expect, had augmented himself with his chakra and sent it flying. This had not been his intent. Somehow he was stronger and faster. Everyone in the room was frozen in shock at the sheer outrageous speed with which Naruto had attacked the one predator. Everyone but the remaining 2 predators who were already behind him and took the chance to spin around and attack Naruto from the back. Unfortunately for them, Naruto, through his various sensory abilities, was pretty much omniscient in a localized area. Realizing his earlier mistake with how hard he had kicked the other predator creature, Naruto used a technique better suited to capturing enemies, a technique that was distinctly one belonging to those of his bloodline. The Uzumaki chakra chains, sometimes known as the adamantine sealing chains. From his back sprang forth golden chains of energy that immediately sped towards the 2 remaining predators. They attempted to dodge and retreat from the golden chains, but the chakra chains pursued them like they had a mind of their own and wrapped around the predators' necks like a noose before lifting them into the air. It honestly looked like he was trying to hang them with the way his chakra chain suspended them in the air as they struggled, but he had a very different reason for doing this, one that involved Laura. Their deaths were not meant to come at his hands, but at the hands of his companion, whose claws were far better suited to cutting through the predator's metallic skins. Something she proved not even a second later. With grace and elegance that would have left the world's greatest ballerinas and gymnasts in awe, Laura performed a series of complex acrobatic maneuvers towards the predators, suspended 3 meters in the air, and decapitated both with her foot claws. The duo thumps of their bodies hitting the ground as blood gushed from their severed necks brought home the realization for Julian and Cecily that these nightmare creatures were gone for good, well, at least for 2 of the 3, thanks to Naruto's little error. But that done, Naruto raised his hand and started gathering chakra. This was not the Rasengan but rather a cousin of the 4th Hokage's infamous technique and the inspiration from which the Rasengan was first created, albeit a weaker version of that original technique. It was technique that every tailed beast and Jinchuriki with control over their tailed beast understood how to perform almost instinctively. The tailed beast ball, or in this case the menacing ball, which was just a vastly weaker version of the tailed beast ball, quickly formed in his outstretched hand. Blue and red energy from the world gathered around his outstretched hand in a ball the size of soccer ball before turning a dark murky purple. Satisfied with his creation, Naruto began concentrating the power, compacting and shrinking it down till it was the size of tennis ball and turning it a menacing black from which it got its name. Moving towards Mercury and Hellion while dragging the corpses of the dog monsters he'd killed, Naruto turned to Laura and said, "Get behind me, Laura." "What is that?" Laura asked curiously as she obeyed Naruto's instructions. Naruto simply replied, "A bomb." "Then why are you bringing it here, Dumbus?" Hellion protested as much Naruto's amusement. They weren't in any harm as long he didn't release concentrated chakra. Still, he needed them behind him, so replied in a tone that brokered no argument. "There is no time to explain. I need you all behind me so I can shield you from the blast. DCH. Tell us that shit before you go making bombs. Julian complained but obeyed. What about the guards? Won't it kill them? Cause we are X-Men, not killers. Naruto smiled and replied. It's a small bomb. It will scare them and shake them up as long as they don't set foot in this room. We are in the room, idiot. Hellion whined. Like I said, I will shield you from the blast. With those words, Naruto's chakra chains deposited the remains of the predators on the floor behind him before they shot into the floor, spreading out around the four of them and forming a dome-like matrix, followed by a transparent barrier popping into existence. It didn't look like much, but it was one of the most powerful barrier in existence, and one Naruto's own mother had one used to overpower the Kyuubi itself and keep even a cage from entering it. Hell, it was the reason she was kidnapped as child by hidden cloud ninjas, forcing her father to save her and kick off their love life. The barrier. Laura spoke up, startled as she pressed her hand against a glowing field of golden energy surrounding them before she noted that the menacing ball Naruto had created was no longer in his hands and asked. Where is the bomb? Pointing outside the barrier to where Naruto had left ball of energy that was already beginning to destabilize as it began to glow a brilliant white, he casually replied. Over there. Close your eyes and brace yourself. Huh? Oh fuck. Bomb. Hellion's voice was drowned out as the explosion turned their room into a miniature sun, vaporizing everything in the lab as it sent a powerful shockwave outwards that simply toppled all the surrounding walls and shattered every glass object in the facility. Even within the dome where its occupants were protected from both the explosion and the deafening thunderclap that was its shockwave, the ground shook violently enough to throw everyone save Naruto off their feet. The benefits of using chakra to keep yourself standing. All visibility of the world outside the dome was gone due to dust and smoke floating through the air. The only light available to them for seeing each other was the light generated from Naruto, whose left head was suddenly covered in golden energy and glowing vibrantly. Well, it was a waste of chakra and Naruto was already dangerously close to sending himself into a chakra coma. He did it for the benefit of the other two, it would at least keep them from panicking. Laura was a highly trained assassin, so he had no doubt that she was fine with darkness and explosions. Hoped. Using his senses, Naruto could feel that the guards who had been sent to apprehend kill them were still alive, but they were not in good condition due to burst eardrums, the ceiling coming down on top of them, and various other side effects of being too close to an explosion. Still, they were alive, which meant Hellion couldn't pull another hissy fit. That didn't stop the half-deaf telekinetic from opening his mouth again and screaming. The hell was that? Giving him a blank look, Naruto responded, I did say bomb, didn't I? Holy crap, these scientist freaks were trying to make a weapon and succeeded. Hellion cursed as he turned to Laura and Mercury, who had just managed to reform into a human shape again. She was strange. It reminded him of the Hizoki clan. Still, Hellion's assumption were way off and needed correcting. Incorrect. I had those powers long before these people captured me. Their goal was to harness me as a weapon, or at the very least my DNA, to build a new type of living weapon. A new weapon X, as they called it. Everyone in the room shuddered at the idea, especially since 3/4 of the people in the room had been experimented on directly by the facility. Finally, Hellion said in a teasing manner. Then it's a good thing Laura saved your ass, even if it's lame someone as powerful as you needed saving in the first place. You're really immature. Naruto coldly responded before turning to Mercury and saying. You must be Mercury. I apologize if it seems tactless, but are you capable of retrieving your stolen genetic material from these monsters? Dude. That is totally tactless. Hellion exclaimed. It probably was, but they needed to get moving before more guards showed up and made things difficult. Naruto did not have much chakra left to spend and would likely have to resort to Taijutsu and Shuriken Jutsu if any came looking. He was banking on the fact that if anyone was watching through the numerous cameras in the facility, his little display would intimidate them. And even if they did come his way, the dust and smoke would cause a lot of confusion with which he, Laura and her friends could sneak out. As I said, I apologize for that, but from what I can sense she is still connected to the silver skin on those monsters. They carry her life signature, and that skin is still alive, so I believe it possible that she can reabsorb that skin into herself and in doing so simultaneously regain her strength and deny our enemy a resource to make more of these abominations. Naruto finished gesturing to the creatures they had killed. Hellion, however, did not like his wording and grabbed him by the neck before yelling into Naruto's face. She is not a resource. Call her that one more time and I'll. Whatever threat he was about to level at Naruto never made it past Julian's lips, for a vice-like clamp, in the form of Naruto's hand, wrapped itself around his wrist, which was still around Naruto's neck, and wrenched it away. Pain shot through Hellion's hand as he felt wrist being crushed, but before he could even think of screaming he was jerked off balance and Naruto's leg swept behind Julian's feet, sending him crashing to the ground in surprise. His back hit the ground before he had time to regain his balance, and all the breath left in his lungs after his little rant was forced out of him. The whole sequence of events had been timed for just that perfect moment before he took another breath, and so Hellion suddenly found himself powerless to say another word as Naruto stood over him and finally spoke up. You seem as quick to misunderstand the situation as you are at hurling baseless accusations, Hellion. I know she is person, not an object, and I sympathize with her. However, I also know that in this room you are the only one who has no idea what kind of hell she's just been through, so forgive me if I don't give two shits about your righteous indignation, cause the fact is. To the people who created this place, we are all nothing more than resources. So think about that as you catch your breath. Meanwhile, Mercury can try and reabsorb her genetic material. Me and Laura on the other hand will see about tracking that last monster. Naruto finished with a glare at the troublesome teen. We came here for Mercury. We got her, we need to get back to the X mansion. Hellion said as he finally caught his breath, and to Naruto's surprise, Laura agreed with him. Naruto paused for a moment and considered what was being said before replying. You have a point, unfortunately that creature, the one that is still wearing Mercury's skin, is 700 meters due west of our position and hauling ass. I can only track it for a few more minutes before it's in the wind, and make no mistake Hellion, if it escapes we will all regret it, so we need to decide now. Deal with that thing or help Mercury. Mercury? Both Laura and Hellion insisted in unison. Nodding his head and understanding, Naruto deactivated his Byakugan to conserve his currently limited reserves chakra and motioned to Mercury saying. Then it's decided. Now bring her here. Why? What are you planning? Hellion asked suspiciously. The kid's jealousy and stubbornness was beginning to grate on the shinobi's nerves. Still, Naruto calmly replied. I'll give her back some of her lost strength. Hopefully she will be able to heal what's missing now that the other creature is gone. And with that, Naruto used as little healing chakra as he could safely manage to begin healing Mercury, even as she reabsorbed her metallic skin from the two dead predators. VVV. Emma Frost, former White Queen of the Hellfire Club and current deputy headmistress of the Xavier's Institute for Higher Learning, was cursing up a storm. She and the X-Men were following the trail left by Hellion and X-23 as they attempted to rescue their kidnapped teammate Mercury in the Blackbird SR-79 hypersonic stealth jet in order to back up the two mutant teens. They were already in the airspace of the two mutants' last known location, and Emma had been scouring the countryside in hopes of picking up their mental signature when suddenly there were reports of a small explosion in an old factory on local police scanner. It was at that moment that whatever had been blocking Cerebra and her telepathy from reading the minds of anyone in the area was suddenly gone, and like a new star being born, a powerful and overwhelming presence suddenly filled that void. Back at the Xavier's Institute, she could feel her girls, the Stepford Cuckoos, a trio of telepaths who were currently mind-linked and using Cerebra to scan the nation, recoil in pain as they felt the backlash of the same awe-inspiring presence appear before them, metaphorically speaking. And there was no doubt it was a he, was huge with a complex, not entirely human mind that left sections visible to her telepathy and others invisible. Reaching out to take a peek at this being, Emma brushed against his mind. She did not expect him to immediately recoil in surprise as he felt her invading presence in his mind, much less physically turn his head in her direction. There was a pulse of some kind of energy, and Emma Frost became very aware of the fact that even from miles away this being was looking straight at her, and he was not amused. Thinking fast as she felt his hostility quickly rising, she mentally said. My name is Emma Frost, and I mean you no harm. I was curious about the massive psychic presence that had just appeared in range from nowhere. There is nothing wrong with curiosity, but I would ask you respect the privacy of another person's thoughts, Mind Walker. A thunderous voice sent back that would have been incredibly intimidating if not for the fact that Emma could sense his anger at the intrusion rapidly draining through their mental link. Relieved that this godlike being had calmed down so quickly, Emma's curiosity took over and she asked. How is it you can see me from so far away? You are dozens of kilometers at the very least. In the same way that you can read thoughts and wander through the minds of other individuals, it is a gift. You seem to be searching for something. The last part wasn't a question, but an observation made in a tone equal parts cold detachment and amusement. Not something. Emma corrected before following her instincts that said this being she was communicating with was trustworthy and taking a leap of faith as she added. I lost contact a couple of hours ago with two mutant teenagers who were headed in this direction. My last contact with them placed them over this area, and until just now there was a psychic blackout in this area, but now it's gone and in its place is you. Your massive psychic presence is shielding them from my mind. These two teens wouldn't happen to have the codenames X-23 and Hellion, would they? And their purpose here wouldn't happen to be saving their teammate Mercury? It asked with a hint of curiosity. Yes. Have you seen them? The hope and excitement in Emma's projected thoughts was practically audible as she asked this. One moment. He replied. One moment however took nearly a full minute, to which Emma finally asked rather awkwardly. "Hello? You there?" "I'm still here, Mindwalker," came the reply, but his voice was a young and gentle human-sounding voice this time, rather than the thunderous booming of a godlike entity. Even his psychic presence had practically diminished at this point. "Is that you? I can barely sense you now." He was practically invisible now, and only the fact that she was specifically looking for him allowed her to even sense him, but more importantly she could finally sense the other students besides him. "I've raised mental barriers so that my presence isn't so greatly felt. There is only enough to receive your thoughts. As for Hellion, Mercury and Laura Kinney, they are here with me." The being confirmed, although it was unnecessary. What was more shocking was the fact that he knew Laura's name at all, something Emma expressed. "You know X-23's real name? She told me her name when she saved my life. I owe her. I will keep them out of trouble until you arrive, Emma Frost," he replied. "Miss Frost is fine, mister." Emma began, pausing as hint for this young man, divine or alien entity, to drop his name. The being chuckled and replied. "Naruto Uzumaki. Well, just call me Naruto." "Well then, Naruto, who are you?" Emma asked, curious about this newcomer. "To put in your terms. I am Ninja from another universe, stranded on this one. I apologize if not everything translates properly. With all the experimentation that was done on me, I didn't have time to learn the subtleties and nuances of your culture or language, Miss Frost, but the gist of my story is that the people of this facility tried to turn me into one of their weapons, or at the very least use my unique biology to make a new one," Naruto explained quickly. That was surprising, and it led Emma to voice her next question, even as she psychically guided Scott to the location of this facility. "So you are a mutant?" There was a pause for a few seconds before Naruto responded in an unsure tone with, "I don't fully understand the concept. What qualifies as a mutant on this world?" Emma was surprised by the admission, though it gave more credit to Naruto's story of not being from this universe. On the other hand, he must have been from a very different and distant universe if mutants were a strange thing to him. She personally knew half a dozen people that had gone hopping around the multiverse, and they had all encountered mutants wherever they went. Still, they could just be going under a different name. "I am sending you the information directly to your mind." "Receiving," Naruto replied as she sent him all the relevant information on what mutants, also known as Homo Superior, was. After mere seconds of him digesting this information, and she could literally feel how quickly his mind assimilated the information, Naruto simply replied. "I am the next step." Now that was cryptic. Naturally it elicited the question. The next step to what? In human evolution, Miss Frost, just as mutants are a step above Homo sapiens, I am merely what comes next. In a way, I suppose you could call me a mutant if you use the term loosely and squint sideways. The mutations that the X gene gives from what you've shown me can be described as random at best. My powers and the powers of my people are more organized. Let's just say the X gene stopped behaving like that around 800 years ago on my world. Naruto replied in a mix of excitement and amusement. Organized how? This was both alarming and exciting news to her. Naruto claimed to be from another universe. Was that universe set a bit further in the future than this one if mutants as she understood them were the norm 800 years prior? Organized enough that mutations are not called mutations, but rather bloodline limits. If the parents had a particular power, then the children will most certainly have the same power so long as they share blood. It's resulted in those with similar mutations gathering together and intermarrying to form a clan of people with very specific powers. These clans then grouped with other clans boasting their own unique powers to form communities and eventually even small cities called hidden villages. Naruto explained. Interesting. We should talk more once the Blackbird has landed and we get you all sorted out. We are literally 30 seconds out. Emma said, ready to cut the mental link as they approached the top secret facility, which had an entire collapsed section belching flames and smoking like chimney. A shudder quickly ran up her spine, but she dared not voice her thoughts until she cut the link. Indeed, I look forward to it. The first 5 weeks of my life on this world have been hell, but since meeting you mutants, I've found myself looking forward to the future. He sounded pleased for some unknown reason. VVV. Naruto frowned as the leaders of the mutant superhero team, the X-Men, bickered with officers of a military organization known as the Office of National Emergencies, AK-1, in deciding his fate. Apparently one thought he was too dangerous after Hellion explained how he blew up part of the facility and accidentally took out the side jammers blocking Miss Frost's telepathy. Naruto already knew that Julian Keller, as he had learned Hellion's real name, did not like him one bit, and it had something to do with Laura. So it was no surprise that even though the facts in the story were accurate, he made it sound ever so slightly like Naruto was a maniac, fueling one officer, Colonel Reyes's paranoia against the shinobi. The fact that none of them could simply penetrate his mind and take whatever information they wanted, nor was he willing to let them into his mind, did not help this lack of trust. Also to the giant 100 feet tall autonomous blue, silver and purple puppets bristling with weaponry that the locals called sentinels. He apparently appeared to be both a mutant and not one, so one was hesitant to remand him into the custody of the X-Men. On the other hand, and much to the surprise of everyone present, his earlier conversation with Miss Emma Frost was a blessing in disguise, and she was the top person championing his cause. Well, she and Laura, something that seemed to freak out all the other X-Men, seeing as apparently the two never got along. All of this, however, was a secondary concern to Naruto at the moment, for what held his full attention was the throbbing pain in his newly regrown right forearm. A pain that had been steadily increasing for the last hour and been diligently ignored until now. Flaring his Byakugan to life so as to take a closer look at what was causing this pain, what Naruto found surprised him so much so that he yelped. "What in Kami's name?" All arguments came to stop as everyone turned to Naruto, who was simply staring at his hand as if it had grown a mouth, ears and a pair of eyes, and then started up a conversation. Before anyone could even ask what was wrong, there was a very distinct snick sound that echoed across the room. Every X-Man and mutant who had ever been around Logan or Laura knew that sound intimately, the sound of the feral mutants extending their claws. However, that sound did not come from Wolverine, who wasn't even present, nor his clone this time. It came from Naruto's right arm. For there, extending from between his ring finger and pointer finger, as well as his pointer finger and index fingers, were two 12-inch claws just like Laura's. Now he understood how the facility had enhanced his natural healing abilities. They had somehow grafted Laura's DNA into his own, and this was just a side effect. Turning to the gathered government officials and the X-Men, Naruto spoke up for the first time, saying, "It seems they used Laura's DNA to enhance my own regeneration powers." With his new claws clearly on display, the woman in charge of the One People gave an audible groan while glaring at a rather smug-looking Emma Frost and said, "We will leave him in the X-Men's care for now, but we will keep a close eye on him." Colonel Reyes, the military man in the green uniform with medals and pinned to his chest and a funny hat, immediately began to protest. "Director Cooper, you can't." Unfortunately, it seemed this Director Cooper wasn't in the mood to take shit from any of her subordinates and immediately cut him off with a final, "That will be all, Colonel." The colonel bit back a sigh of frustration before replying, "Yes, ma'am. Let's pack it up, people." With that done, he marched off and began giving orders to the other one personnel. Meanwhile, Scott Summer, codenamed Cyclops, who was not only leader of the X-Men, but alongside Emma Frost, were the headmaster and headmistress of the Xavier Institute for Higher Learning, walked up to him to speak of his future, no doubt. VVV. Scott Summers, leader of the X-Men, representative of mutantkind and headmaster of the Xavier's Institute for Higher Learning, walked up the boy who was now officially a ward of the X-Men. To say that he found this Naruto Uzumaki fascinating was an understatement. For one, the more his lover Emma Frost learned about the kid, the more excited she seemed to get, and Scott did not need telepathy to tell that Emma wanted Naruto enrolled in their school. For another, X-23 seemed just as fascinated with this boy, who, from what information Emma had pulled out of Laura and Julian's minds and then shared with him, was due to him hinting at having a past much like Laura's and turning out a lot more human. Then there was the fact that he was from another universe where his people were similar to mutants, but supposedly a bit more advanced, which made even him curious. If this boy was the next step in mutant evolution, perhaps in his genetic code, there was an answer or a miracle of some kind that could bring hope to mutantkind and prevent its extinction. He would have Beast look into it. Scott was also interested in seeing how skilled the kid was in a fight. He'd already seen with Emma's help the plethora of skills he'd displayed in front of Laura, Cecily and Hellion. If the kid was half and as skilled as he believed him to be, then he would be a badly needed resource in the dark days to come. Which was why Scott was most determined to recruit the kid. Naruto was it. Upon receiving a nod from the boy in question, Scott declared, "Well, it's nice to finally meet you. Laura and Emma have both said some nice things about you in front of a lot of important people, and I wanted to meet the man himself and get my own measure." The young man merely cocked his head sideways and asked, "Are you Emma's lover?" "Boogie, I suppose it's no secret that we are in a relationship. Why do you ask?" The question had caught Cyclops flat-footed with how it came out of nowhere, but his reply made Emma beam, who was not so secretly listening in from where she was in a very different conversation with Laura and Cecily. Being in a relationship with a telepath meant sharing headspace with one. Curiosity. Her eyes soften every time she looks at you, and she smiles a bit more when she looks or talks to you than with just about everyone here. Your tells, on the other hand, are a bit more obvious. Naruto replied in an almost clinical tone as he spouted his observations. Though he declined to elaborate on Scott's tells, as he called them. Slightly taken aback by the ninja from another universe, Scott quickly tried to get things back on track. "Oh, Yumike. How about we discuss my love life another time and instead we talk about you for a moment?" Naruto seemed to pause for a moment in thought before saying, "I apologize for making you uncomfortable, Mr. Summers. Please go ahead with your questions. I'm not uncomfortable with the question itself, just where it was leading to, and it was getting way off track. My interest today on the other hand is in you Naruto Uzumaki. I want to know who you are and I want to know what you plan on doing next. Then once you've answered those questions, I have an offer to make. Scott explained. Naruto merely smiled in amusement at this and replied. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I'm 19 years old and a ninja from another universe. As for why I am on your world. It's not by choice and nor is it really important save for the fact that for the time being I am stranded here. So to answer your question on what I plan on doing next, well, that's simple enough. First things first, I will secure shelter, clothing and nourishment. Something I can accomplish in 24 hours one way or another, then with the basics secured I will begin gathering information on this world. It's math, sciences, technology, religions, economics, social studies and whatever else is necessary to blend in. Once that is done I will look up any information you have about trans-universal travel and any other related topics so I can figure out where my home is and how to get back inevitably. Does that satisfy your curiosity? It's impressive that you got it all so figured out already, but what if I can offer you my assistance with all that? What if I can give you that shelter, food, clothing and all the information you could dream of? Would you take my offer to join me and the X-Men back at our headquarters for the time being? Cause I think we can benefit from your presence as much as you can benefit from ours. Scott said. It really was impressive that this 18 or 19-year-old kid seemed to have his goals figured out already and was so confident he could achieve them when not even 3 hours ago he was a prisoner of this facility. But then he was a ninja from another universe, so who knew what kind of training he had. Laura seems to trust you, so yeah, I guess we have a deal then, Mr. Summers. Naruto simply replied, extending his hand. Taken aback by how quickly the negotiations ended, Cyclops shook the extended hand while saying. Oh, great. I must confess that I really thought I would have to do a bit more to convince you on my proposition. Naruto merely smiled at him before looking meaningfully in Laura's direction and replying. Like I said, I will secure shelter, clothing and nourishment in 24 hours one way or another. This way just allows me to keep a promise while I am at it. BBC. Chapter 2. A Fish Learns to Walk. I've been studying this world closely, specifically its heroes and its villains. A pattern has emerged, one in which Earth seems to frequently get targeted by grossly superior opposing forces time and time again. And yet, humanity's meager might always prove sufficient to beat back the enemy. Each and every time. Even when they should not have possibly won. One could say that humanity is pretty damn lucky, too lucky even. My opinion is that something is balancing the scales, this more than anything stands out to me. Naruto Uzumaki. Dreamscape. Naruto's vision blurred from the tears streaking down his face. The natural sounds of the world around him were dulled to the point of almost being muted to his ear. Even physical sensation was gone aside from a mind-numbing cold and the dullest of pressure to represent touch. Naruto felt almost nothing, with almost being the key word. Despite his senses being shot to hell and back, Naruto wasn't worried. Uzumakis were creatures of emotion, and if there was one thing he could still do, it was feel emotions. Unfortunately, his heart was filled to the brim with grief for all that he loved as he beheld his home village and its citizens. The sky was choked with acrid smoke for as far as the horizon and possibly beyond that. The surrounding forests of the Land of Fire were all ablaze. Hokage Mountain, the most prominent symbol of his village, was mysteriously missing. All that was left behind of it being a massive crater, as if an almighty god had reached down from the heavens and scooped it up from out of the ground. Everywhere he looked something was going wrong. The buildings and architecture of the village were literally disintegrating before his very eyes as they were caught in the intense ethereal blaze. Animals turned to ashes mid-step and faded into nothingness as tongues of unquenchable white flame spread everywhere. However, it was the people who had the worst fate in his opinion, particularly the civilians. His people, the citizens of Konoha whom he'd originally grown up hating, then bickering with, then pranking and finally learned to love. All around him, they were turning into piles of pure white ash that scattered in the wind before his very eyes. No civilians seemed to be safe from the flames as they sought out and almost aggressively leaped from family to family, consuming all in their path. Mothers held their children close in a tight embrace as the white flames enveloped them, fathers watched on in sad resignation as they befell the same fate. Any human that the white flames touched slowly turned to ash and then scattered in a non-existent breeze. Despite the blaze, no human burned, they simply turned to ashes and ceased to be before Naruto's eyes. The only humans who seemed to be unaffected by this phenomenon were the shinobi, and none of them had so far even tried to stop the flames, not even him. Behind him, Shikamaru Nara stood beside his fiancée Temari, hugging her closely as he gave Naruto a sad smile. Choji Akimichi and his new girlfriend from Kumo stood together with Sakura Haruno and Ino Yamanaka. Their eyes filled with a mix of confidence, resignation and regret. Anabi Hyuga openly wept in the sleeves of her father Hiashi's robes, while Konohamaru awkwardly tried to comfort her. Jiraiya of the Sannin held his wife the 5th Hokage Tsunade Senju as she cried in his arms, rubbing her back soothingly. Meanwhile the 6th Hokage Kakashi Haddock barked orders at the various Anbu and Jounin as they mobilized further in the heart of the village for some unknown purpose. Like an observer in his own body, Naruto watched all this occurring around him, unable to do a thing about it. His body completely unresponsive to his commands as everything he'd ever known literally burned around him. Then Sasuke had dropped out of the sky like a vengeful angel, landing silently beside him, his Rinnegan fully active. Proper Sound seemingly decided to return to the world at that exact moment as Naruto's brother in all but blood said. The Otsutsuki clan are almost here. They've brought an army. Are you ready, loser? Of course, you bastard. Naruto heard himself automatically reply with a confident smirk. There was no heat in his words, only affection for his fellow transmigrant. Somehow they both knew this would be the last time they'd see each other for a while, quite possibly even forever. Naruto couldn't explain why he was so sure about this, but he knew it, they both understood this, and they were prepared to live with that. For a second time, Naruto instinctively knew that they had long since said anything that needed to be said to each other, so no more words were needed. Not to mention the two strongest ninjas in shinobi history had two very different jobs at the moment. Which was why Sasuke merely raised his right fist for a fist bump, a motion that Naruto instantly mimicked with own raised fist and a grin that could only be described as foxy. Good luck then, brother. Make them bleed for me. Take care of everyone. Was Naruto's only response as Sasuke's Rinnegan flared to life in a purple blaze of power and light, a portal materializing out of the ether before them. There was an impossibly loud bang as the ground beneath Naruto's feet cratered, time slowed to a crawl, and the Redeed sped up to near relativistic speeds. The distance between where he previously stood and the portal was crossed so fast time itself became an obsolete factor to him. Then he leaped into its heart and allowed himself to be swallowed. How long he spent in between dimensions was irrelevant cause time never flowed normally there, but before he knew it, Naruto appeared on the other side of the portal. It was Kagaya's ice dimension, and it held an army pale-skinned alien gods ready to invade his dying world. He would not let that happen. With his Byakugan fully activated and his Tanto drawn, all he could do was grin and do what he did best. Draw a line in the sand and kill anything that crossed it. His world was on fire and there was nothing in the universe that would save it from turning to ash. But before the end of this day every world would burn. VVV. Naruto woke up with start and promptly fell off of the sofa he had been lying on. Looking around in panic, he relaxed when he remembered exactly where he was and why he was there. He was currently in Ms. Emma Frost's office where with a bit of her psychic help, he'd been reliving one of his memories. To be specific, it was his last memory of the elemental nations before arriving on Earth and waking up in the clutches of the Weapon X program. More alarmingly though, it was the only memory he had of his time between the aftermath of the Fourth Shinobi World War and his arrival here. Everything else was simply gone, and even a psychic as powerful as Emma couldn't help recover his missing memories. Wiping the tears from the corners of his eyes, a side effect from the dream trance, he focused on the owner of said office, sitting in a comfortable chair, reading a rather popular orange book from the elemental nations. Naruto didn't miss the slight tug at her lips as she placed the Icha Paradise book down and gave him a once-over, pretending to have not noticed his tears. Emma Frost was obviously amused but not by his tears. Rather she found amusement in how he'd fallen off the sofa. Giving him a warm and supportive smile, Emma asked. Am I correct in assuming you were slightly more successful today? Indeed, Ms. Frost. He replied, it was all Naruto could come up with in that moment. The psychic trances or dream walks that Emma put him under always took a lot out of him when he was done, so he had to take a moment to recover. It apparently had something to do with chakra not meshing very well with psychic energy as it existed on Earth. This was according to her teammate Dr. Henry McCoy aka Beast, who was the X-Men's resident super genius. And yes, Naruto was more than surprised that there was a level of intelligence even beyond genius, but there really wasn't any other word that could describe people like Reed Richards, Tony Stark, Hank Pym, Bruce Banner and Henry McCoy, to name a few. Apparently the spiritual mental energy component of chakra and by extension all yin-natured chakra as Naruto put, were all a form of psychic energy. However, it was also different from the psychic energy native to their Earth due to it not only being tied to Naruto's life force and his soul, but also being born from chakra itself, a weaponized form of life force. In short, the two were similar but not quite the same. Siblings even, for lack of a better term. However, it was that same incompatibility that gave Naruto a natural resistance to all psychics. He wasn't immune to psychic attacks, he just happened to be able to instantly notice such attacks and brush them off with relative ease before any damage could even be done. And in the off chance that a telepath of sufficient power managed to get into his head, it was quite literally an uphill battle all the way, seeing as his head and by extension, his whole body was saturated with chakra. In short, Naruto was extremely resistant to all psychic attacks, at least on the human mutant level. This wasn't even taking into account the fact that Naruto and by extension any shinobi capable of even using shadow clones did not even think like humans. That's not to say that they did not have human thoughts, but rather their natural ability to process information itself was not only beyond human, but in many ways not human. Ignoring the fact that one full half of chakra was psychic energy, normal humans could not truly multitask and maintain efficiency in whatever activity they were performing. Efficiency always went down the moment any amount of focus was prioritized on one activity over the other. Shinobi on the other hand weren't so limited. From carefully selected memories Naruto had shared, Emma had come to the conclusion that a shinobi's brain was hardwired and helped along by chakra-induced mutations to handle massive amounts of information. Something that was seen most prominently when they absorbed all the information returned from a dispelled shadow clone. Even receiving the sensory information of one dispelled clone would knock out a normal human, with greater risks being created the longer the clone remained active. Two dispelled shadow clones would do anything from put a human into a minor coma to leaving them brain dead. 3 was an automatic death sentence, yet the average Jounin could easily process information from upwards of 20 dispelled clones. Every single feeling, thought and emotion that the clone had while alive was transferred back to the original at the same time, allowing them to experience every single clone's life almost simultaneously. Even if it was just for a moment, to a normal human or a non-psychic mutant, experiencing the return of all that information after having your clone dispelled would be like having every single neuron in your brain firing at the same time, repeatedly and at a ridiculously fast pace. Your brain would feel like it was on fire, and that would be from a single clone. Thus shinobi in general did not think like humans. God forbid a monster like Naruto, and she meant that in the nicest way possible, for whom it took upwards of 2,000 clones, simultaneously dispelling for him to even get a headache, which his regeneration took care of in a second flat. Even as she was having this session with him, hundreds of Naruto's clones had raided Dr. McCoy's library and were simply soaking in all the information relevant to this world like a sponge. It was quite frankly terrifying. Still, she had a job to do. Anything new? It was mostly the same. Naruto responded as he began to describe memory which had been getting clearer and clearer upon each revisiting. The world burning and the shinobi forces making no moves to stop the fires or save the civilians for some reason. Then my brother showed up and opened a portal to another dimension that should have been covered in ice and snow, yet I think it might have been burning. Unfortunately I don't remember seeing anything despite the fact that my Byakugan was active the whole time. All I do know is that I was going to fight a group of alien godlike beings known as the Otsutsuki clan who wanted to invade my world for some reason. That's about all I got. Well, you are remembering more and more details each time we do this, Mr. Uzumaki. Unfortunately, I think I am at the limits of all the psychic assistance I can give you. The psychic element of your powers is extremely efficient at keeping telepaths out of your head and interfering whenever one of us successfully gets in. It's honestly a pain in the arse. Emma complained with an exasperated sigh before adding. Which is why as soon as he gets back I am going to have to surrender you to the expertise of Professor Charles Xavier, the man who built this school and created the X-Men. He is the most powerful telepath on the planet and if anyone can help you with your forgotten memories, it's him. Nodding in acceptance, although with a clear tinge of reluctance in his body language, Naruto replied professionally. I understand and thank you Ms. Frost. I really appreciate all you've done for me. Emma said nothing, instead choosing to simply nod her head once. Technically this meeting was over, she'd done what he'd asked for and he was free to go. However Naruto was still a little disoriented from the psychic trance mind walk and while he could walk out of there on his own power even now, Emma knew that he would prefer to wait a few minutes. And with this being the 7th meeting they had had so far, he was becoming something similar to a friend to her. Which made this the perfect opportunity to ask a few personal questions. So how are you doing with all this? About as good as can be expected, considering my last memory of home is of the whole world on fire, my people turning to ash, my friends and family leaving for the unknown, and myself fighting off an alien invasion. Of course, she'd forgotten how grouchy Naruto could be when he came out of his memories. There was something of a sarcastic edge to his voice as he responded, but she knew he didn't mean it. He was just hoping desperately that it would hide the anguish she felt inside. Emma wasn't fooled by this, and they both knew it. They'd perform this little dance every day for a week, so she knew how much this bothered him. In that time she had come to respect Naruto as person immensely and learned to be patient with him. So instead of trying to force answers out of him she changed her angle of questioning and simply asked. How about life here on Earth? How are you handling that? Anything particular you are enjoying? Naruto let out a sigh of exasperation at her persistence. He had admitted previously that he admired her stubbornness when it came to questioning him about his feelings, but it also pissed him off. Still, just like she respected him, he had come to respect her. However, that didn't mean he was just going to freely give her what she wanted, so he replied. I was trained to adapt to any kind of situation I might find myself in. And believe it or not, Ms. Frost, I've been to alternate realities before. Not something quite as unique and different as this, but you get the idea. I believe the Earth saying been there, done that covers it, right? Honestly, it's like pulling teeth. Interesting sayings and peculiar adventures aside, this told her nothing about what he really felt at the moment. He might as well have just replied I am fine Ms. Frost for all the difference it would have made. Not to mention the fact that he willingly called her Ms. Frost instead of Emma after the official session had ended was another indicator that he was trying to push her away. It was only during the psychic trances that they ever addressed each other formally, afterwards she was always Emma and he was Naruto. Instead of voicing her frustration with a somewhat stable child soldier in front of her, she merely smiled and used a few choice words to force an answer out of the boy. It was cruel, yes, but Naruto needed to open up to someone, he was too dangerous to humanity as a whole to be able to afford not to. Not to mention, Emma found herself starting to care about him, even if she didn't want to admit. I suppose it does cover it. Still, you are stranded here for the foreseeable future. How does it make you feel that you are here safe and yet you have no idea what kind of situation your people are in? I am worried, okay? I don't know the fate of my people or my world, so will you quit probing? Naruto instantly snapped at her, an audible growl leaving his throat. He was doing a remarkable job of not turning his aggression against her, but that growl was a warning. If she kept pushing, well. Emma didn't visibly react, but she felt relief inside that he had admitted something real to her. Relief that she knew that Naruto would pick up on. Whoever thought that a therapy session impromptu or not between an empath and telepath would ever be good idea needed to be shot. Not that this was really a therapy session, but whatever. It didn't change the fact that he needed to hear this. Naruto, you need to open up and speak to someone. They both knew she wasn't just talking about starting a conversation or being social with others. Naruto could do that easily, in his sleep even. He was surprisingly good at making friends for someone who would have no qualms with killing those very same friends if he had to. He wasn't a sociopath or anything, but if this Itachi Uchiha was willing to kill his whole family in one night, then there wasn't much she believed that would stop Naruto from murdering all of them under the right circumstances. Especially since he had yet to truly connect to anyone. As if to mock that notion, Naruto's entire demeanor changed to a less aggressive and almost friendly one as he said to her with a wink. I got you, don't I? Cheeky bugger. No, I mean someone you really trust. With me you are merely asking for some psychic help and you are only doing that cause your own methods failed to provide answers. With me, you are cordial, friendly even, but we both know you'd never truly let me close. At least not so soon. It kind of stung to admit it after a week of getting to know the man, especially since she knew exactly who he would let in and how easily Naruto would open up to her. But she really liked the kid and it was one of the few things that she shared in common with Logan and his clone. I've shown you parts of my history. Shinobi secrets that I wouldn't even trust other shinobi from my world with. He responded. And it was true, some of the things she'd been shown by him as he guided her through his mindscape were utterly amazing, utterly horrifying or some combination of both, and almost always secretive. Yet even so, she knew he didn't trust her or anyone else at the Xavier Institute for Higher Learning. Or rather, he didn't trust anyone enough to share his emotional burdens with them. Not really. Logan, Beast, herself and X-23 were the closest things to real friends he had here and X-23 had been kept away from him since they left the Weapon X facility. Though Naruto had expressed interest in getting to know Psylocke, but whether that was because Elizabeth Braddock was a ninja or because Naruto Uzumaki could be a bit of pervert when he put his mind to it was up in the air. Honestly, some of things Jiraiya of the Sannin and Kakashi Haddock had him do well, she literally had no words to describe them. Not that she didn't appreciate their efforts, or she wouldn't have been enjoying the Icha Icha series in her lounge chair. That man is a talented writer, wherever he is. But that was besides the point. The point being, Emma didn't blame Naruto for his reluctance to trust, nor did she try and pry his secrets out of him. Not that she could do so without him noticing and simply ending her in some gory fashion. Everyone had secrets and everyone was entitled to their secrets. Naruto had already shown them a remarkable amount of trust by showing her and by extension the X-Men as much as he already had. The fact that the memories he had shown excluded anything that they might find useful or could be used against his people was besides the point. Sure, he had only shown her the interior of the Shinobi Academy, Hokage Tower, Hokage Mountain, a view of Konoha from the top of the 4th Hokage's stone head, the Valley of the End, Tenzaku-gai, the surrounding forests of the Land of Fire, and 100 other miscellaneous things. Each one from a position that hid any classified shinobi activities. He never showed shinobi military secrets, advanced team formations, shinobi training, shinobi equipment, etc. Hell, Emma knew in her heart he would literally rather die than expose any of his people's weaknesses. Naruto had accommodatingly explained this fierce protectiveness that all of his people shared with a single phrase. He called it the will of fire and declared that every single Konoha citizen had it. Naruto had even taken the time to show her that the depths of their protectiveness for one another was so great that his people would die to keep the secrets of even someone they hated from outsiders. Even he had claimed that he'd been a victim of unjust public hatred at one point in his life, yet when an outside force attacked his village looking for him. Many of the shinobi literally died taking the secret of his location to the grave, despite the fact that they did not at all like him. It was cause of this philosophy that the idea of betraying the village was so anathema to his people. In the 100 years since the founding of the village, less than 10 people had ever betrayed it, and only 3 of those could be considered truly successful at that due to the hyper-competent Anbu Black Ops program. Those terrifying monsters would hunt you down to the ends of the earth, behead you, and then destroy every inch of your body to keep enemies from discovering its secrets, if you ever tried. On top of that, one of those 3 traitors wasn't even an actual traitor, but a hero who stopped a civil war before it started by slaughtering his clan and allowed himself to labeled a traitor so as to spy on a very dangerous upcoming terrorist organization. You could get away with betraying an individual from the village, murder them even. And though you would probably be jailed for it or executed, such an action would still be considered something personal between 2 individuals. Betray the village and every single person who calls Konoha home would instantly become your enemy, and you could bet that they'd do their damn best to kill you at every chance they got till the day you die. You'd have to be on the run for the rest of your life, constantly looking over your shoulders the whole time. In short, Konoha didn't tolerate traitors. Which was why Naruto was having such a hard time with the memory she'd helped him recover. The will of fire was so deeply imbued in him and his fellow Konoha ninjas that he couldn't accept the idea that they would all just stand aside and watch the civilian citizens of his village burn. He couldn't accept that not even one ninja, himself included, was willing to lift a finger to save a life. It just wasn't how Konoha ninjas worked. So with his last memory being of his world on fire, ninjas going off to gather somewhere unknown and an army of Otsutsuki in another dimension that he personally fought. Was it any surprise that Naruto was near manic in his desire to get back home quickly and figure out what the hell was going on? Oh, when in view of others he pretended to be confident and unflappable, but Emma knew the truth. She'd been inside his head after all. Returning to the conversation, she replied. True, but then I can't exactly use those secrets or blab them to any enemy from your world to use them. They are completely useless on this earth. Furthermore, well, you trusted me with those secrets, you don't actually trust me, not really. That's why I am saying find someone you can truly confide in, at least until you trust me enough to really talk to me. Otherwise, you will burn yourself out and your worries will destroy you. Sighing tiredly, Naruto rose to his feet and said with a tone of finality. It's late and I'm tired, Ms. Frost. I'm going to rest now so we can pick this up some other time. Fine, just think about what I said. Emma said, to which Naruto nodded and then made his way to the door to leave. She didn't push because he genuinely was considering her words and had gotten her point. However, Naruto did surprise her when before he was even halfway out the door, he suddenly paused mid-stride and spoke up once more. It's not that I don't trust you, Emma. My problem has always been that I trusted too easily. And I've been betrayed countless times cause of it. Thus, Naruto Uzumaki must not trust you or anybody else easily, things generally turn out better for everyone that way. Naruto paused for a moment after saying this, as if to choose his next words carefully, and then finally added. However, when I truly give my trust, I give it completely, and those who betray my trust, I destroy completely. With his piece said, Naruto walked out and closed the door behind him, leaving Emma Frost to sigh tiredly at his threat-promise explanation of his trust issues. Internally she mused. That's right, Naruto was the commander of those Anbu monsters. VVV. It had been 1 week since the incident at the Weapon X facility where she rescued him, a full week since Laura Kinney last saw Naruto Uzumaki. The fascinating, scarlet-haired ninja from another universe had been locked away in an isolated room within Dr. Henry McCoy's lab for testing. Laura had no idea why Naruto would agree to this after what he'd just been through, but she hadn't been able to ask cause she wasn't allowed to see him. Cyclops had made some bullshit excuse about how he might be carrying an unknown contagion and that they couldn't risk her and the others catching. Laura's response was to level him with an incredulous look upon hearing that and bluntly ask if he was an idiot. Even Emma had face-palmed at the leader of the X-Men's sad lie. As Wolverine's genetic clone and someone who shared his mutant powers, Laura literally couldn't get sick to begin with, barring extraordinarily special circumstances. Not to mention, any contagion or alien pathogen Naruto might have carried would have already have been exposed to Hellion and Mercury immune systems if any of Scott's crap had been true. Yet, Laura and her teammates were neither sick nor had they undergone any form of quarantine, further illustrating that the whole excuse was pure bullshit. But even then, Laura had been denied access to Dr. McCoy's lab. Of course she tried breaking into it on 3 separate occasions just to check up on Naruto, but the X-Men stationed a hidden guard outside of Naruto's room every night. The first and third time she had tried break, it was her father, Wolverine, who had been waiting for her in the shadows. The second time she'd gotten caught had been by the ninja telepath, Psylocke. Neither times had been fun, thanks to the tongue lashing she'd received afterwards. And after the third time, Logan had let her off with a stern warning to not try again, or there would be real consequences the next time. However, inheriting her progenitor's stubbornness, Laura had only agreed to stop trying after Beast had explained a couple things to her. Like, well, Cyclops' explanations was pure crap, Naruto had willingly agreed to be quarantined and the actual reasons for it were very important. Though Dr. McCoy still kept silent about why Naruto agreed to this or what they were doing with him. He had volunteered to say hi to Naruto on her behalf. In the end, that past week had proven to be easily one of the most frustrating weeks of her life. So it was no surprise that Laura was rather keen to see Naruto once again and talk to him about their shared circumstances now that he had been released from quarantine. Better yet, he would be living in one of the rooms in boys' dormitory from now on. A location she could easily access and infiltrate whenever she pleased. From their conversation in the Weapon X facility, Naruto seemed to understand the kind of things that she was going through in a way that no one here other than Logan ever could. The fact that he was really interesting in his own ways also motivated her to see. On the other hand, Laura was getting tired of Hellion's clinginess and the way he was speaking out against Naruto lately. Ever since they had rescued Cecily and Naruto, Julian had been actingerational was the only word she could think of. He was constantly trying to act like he was more capable than he actually was. He'd also taken to speaking about Naruto in a way that, while true, was worded to make the retarded ninja look bad. The fact that the ninja in question wasn't even there to defend himself pissed her off. It was true that Naruto had indeed created a bomb out of his unique energies and detonated in a move that would seem reckless and inconsiderate to human life. But, no one had died and if Naruto had wanted to kill everyone, he could have done so easily. Furthermore, words could never do his actions any real justice, it was one of those things that you had to be there to truly understand the situation they had been in. And Naruto's actions were not necessarily wrong. Reckless maybe but not wrong, after all his energy bomb did take out the Psy Jammers and allow the X-Men and ONE to find them. If Naruto had wanted the enemy dead, they simply would have been. Laura had been able to see that much in his eyes at the time. Plus, the guy had just come out of cryostasis at the time and his mental faculties were not all there. Something that was proven by the fact that the first thing he did upon awakening was call her beautiful almost as soon as he laid eyes on her. He'd obviously been speaking without thinking, even if she found that the compliment made her feel strangely warm inside. In the end it seemed like Hellion was reverting back to the attitude he had once had when she first met him just after M-Day. It was disappointing cause she honestly believed Julian Keller was better than that and could be so much more. Naruto on the other hand was a person of great interest to her and tonight was the first night he'd been allowed to sleep in a normal room without some freakishly competent bodyguard keeping all visitors away from him. Outside of his quarantine, Naruto would be living in the boys' dormitory from now onward, eating and freely interacting with anyone he chose to at the school. And it was cause of this that she had snuck out from the girls' dormitory on the opposite wing of the mansion and was now breaking into his room. Logan had even been surprisingly accommodating and given her Naruto's room number while muttering something about it's always the right deeds that get us isn't it? Laura had no idea what that meant, but she wasn't going to turn down her father-brother progenitor's help when it was given freely. Knowing exactly which room Naruto called his own was slightly easier than taking the 2 minutes max it would take for her pinpoint his room by smell. Not that she hadn't done so anyway. Using her memory of the layout of the building and the fact that his room was on the 2nd floor. Laura snuck outside the mansion, dodged 3 patrols of ONE and senior X-Men personnel before scaling the outside walls to his window and silently opening, then closing it behind her without waking him. It was a feat well beyond anything that any of her fellow teenage mutants could ever replicate. Even many of the full-fledged X-Men would fail, including that reptilian mutant Anole, who could stick to walls like a gecko and camouflage himself. It was all a testament to her training as an assassin and a lifetime of living in the shadows. A single visual sweep of the room picked out Naruto's form in his bed, lightly snoring with a peaceful expression on his face and no surveillance equipment of any sort. A sniff of the air confirmed much the same. So it was no surprise that as the infiltrator began her approach of Naruto's bed to better observe her target, she was completely startled by said target's voice coming from above her. "That's some impressive stealth you're showing there, Laura. If I didn't know better, I'd have assumed you were here to either kill me or prank me. But I do, don't I?" As Naruto spoke up, his bright Cheshire grin faded into view, followed by the rest of his body and scent from where she had previously assumed was an empty spot on the ceiling. Irideed was casually laying on the ceiling with his arms folded behind his head in complete defiance of gravity. He had been using some kind of cloaking power to hide his real self from Laura's senses, she realized. It explained why she hadn't seen, heard or smelled the real him when she originally scanned the room, and she was a damn good tracker. I wonder how he fooled my senses so thoroughly. Looking back to his bed, Laura noted the similarities between Naruto and his decoy. The other Naruto in the bed smelled like him, was lightly drooling, had a heartbeat, looked like him, caused the right amount of depression and to surface the mattress for someone Naruto's size and weight, showed the rapid eye movement of someone dreaming, and made the other such micro movements indicative of someone in deep sleep. To all her senses, the thing in the bed was alive, and it was Naruto. There were many more signs present that would convince her and likely anyone else that she was looking at Naruto Uzumaki sleeping in his own bed. Yet, looking back up to the ceiling, there the scarlet-haired ninja was grinning back at her, calmly laying on the ceiling, as if gravity was a mere suggestion to him. The only thing she could ask at that point was, "How?" "It's another one of my powers." As if to prove that point, the Naruto on the ceiling made a strange gesture with his left hand, and the copy in his bed burst into a cloud of smoke, simply ceasing to be. Laura blinked in confusion as every trace of the Naruto copy who had been in that bed simply stopped existing. Even his scent that had covered the whole room simply vanished as if it had never been there, and something told Laura that every trace of that Naruto's DNA, including hair follicles and dead skin cells, was now gone. She trusted her instincts. "I don't need much sleep, and this is the best way to draw out and observe anyone with ill intent towards me. In the lab I had my guard up the whole time, plus no one, except you, was willing to tangle with Wolverine or Psylocke. Thanks for trying, by the way, it was really entertaining to watch. You are an amazingly good fighter." Naruto explained and then complimented with a cheeriness that made Laura blush. "No problem." Laura replied while trying to fight down her blush and the embarrassment she felt at the fact that he knew about her nightly activities that week. In hindsight, it was pretty obvious that he must have seen her little scuffle with her father and Psylocke. Naruto had already said that he could sense life signs, and he had told her that his left eye could see through walls. Not so innocently, she thought. I wonder what else he uses that eye to spy on. Now though. Naruto continued, not paying the slightest attention to her embarrassment. Anyone coming for me would naturally assume I'd let my guard down on my first night out of Dr. McCoy's lab. In which case, if such a person intended to make a move on me, then tonight is naturally the perfect time to strike. It's for this reason that I set up a trap in anticipation of capturing whoever tried to prank or kill me. Anyone that came for me would strike my decoy while I surprised them from above. That was the plan anyway. I didn't think the first person to sneak into my room would be you." Laura's heart seemed to sink with each word out of the ninja's mouth. She didn't want Naruto to think she was out to kill him or something, yet he had been expecting something exactly like that and prepared a trap just in case. A trap she had walked right into. There were only so many ways he could have interpreted that. Luckily for her, Naruto sensed her inner conflict and decided to clarify things. "Relax, Laura, I already know you have no ill intentions towards me, and one of the individuals this trap was created for just so happened to be Kurt Wagner, a fellow prankster. I intend him absolutely no harm whatsoever. Well, aside from his dignity, that is." She nodded in understanding as relief poured through her entire being at the fact that she had avoided a misunderstanding with Naruto. Only for her to blush again when she turned to look back at Naruto and found his face inches from hers. He had alighted from the roof so softly that her enhanced hearing had not picked up any sound whatsoever and was now standing in such close proximity to her as to call it intimate. Jick. A strangled kind of sound left her throat as she took 2 steps backwards in rapid succession while thinking. Too close, too close. What the thought didn't complete itself, for she had no words to fill the blank space in her mind, nor did she feel any genuine annoyance at the ninja. As if nothing had happened, Naruto continued saying. "Now while I sincerely doubt you are here to prank me or fight me, and I wouldn't mind sparring with you or having a prank war, I'd still like to know what I can do for you this evening." He didn't think you would be awake, so I was just going to check on you," Laura said with an increasingly sheepish look, knowing exactly how that sentence could be interpreted. Neither Julian, Saraya or any other members of her team had been happy when she had spent a night observing them. They called it stalking. A mischievous grin adorned Naruto's face for a split second that had X-23 had more experience with humans, and more specifically pranksters, would have worried her. With a suddenly stern face and a very serious tone, Naruto said. "Oh, so you merely intended to watch me all night as I slept?" His tone suggested that this wasn't a question. What could she say to that? Laura knew about common sense and the things normal people called common decencies, but just because she knew of these things didn't mean she really observed them. They were the kinds of things normal people did, the rules normal people followed. She was a killer. So yeah, she fully intended to watch Naruto Uzumaki in his sleep until she either got bored, Naruto began to stir or the sun came up. She hadn't really put any thought into what her actions would look like to someone else until just now, and now that she thought about it. While she normally didn't care about anyone's opinions, she really wished she had thought this whole thing through before coming here. This was something she was regretting, and she didn't even know why. Thankfully at that exact moment, Naruto's serious face broke into a wide grin as he let out a snort of amusement, followed by a hearty chuckle and said, "I'm just messing with you, Laura, something like that doesn't bother me at all. Hell, one of my best friends used to do it all the time when we were kids. Plus, it'd be kind of hypocritical of me to judge you for stalking me when my left eye gives me localized visual omniscience." Jerk. The word automatically popped up in her head to Laura's surprise, cause, while she had used the word before, it wasn't exactly something that was part of her regular vocabulary. She ignored it for now, in favor of responding. Laura paused for a moment as she thought of what she wanted to say to best describe her current feeling. Naruto wasn't angry at her but rather amused, and he'd been faking it well enough that she'd bought. She didn't particularly like the deception, in fact she was kind of pissed at him for it, but she was also extremely relieved for it. Relieved he wasn't angry. Yes, that's what she was feeling. "I'm relieved. You are much better acclimatized to acting human and dealing with emotions. You even joke like them. I wish to be like that, to be like you and Wolverine. You are weapons, but you are also human. I want that." Naruto's face scrunched up in a frown at her words, as if he didn't like what she was saying before he replied. "You are just as human as me and Wolverine, Laura, and way better than I was when my older brother first found me. The Weapon X facility just taught you to bury those feelings and instincts. I will help you to bring them out again, but before that you need to understand something about me and Logan." "What's that?" Laura replied, feeling curious. It seemed like Naruto had some kind of insight into her father and himself that she was yet unaware of from the way he worded that statement. That monster, that killer lurking deep down inside that could butcher thousands of innocents without even blinking. It's still there. It's just suppressed for now and it will never go away. Laura felt something akin to despair fill her heart. She was dangerous, she knew this. To her, the idea that she was a risk to every living thing around her was something as undeniably basic as breathing. What with the trigger scent hanging over her head like a sword of Damocles. However, seeing Naruto act so human right now, seeing Logan do so on multiple occasions before today, Laura had come to believe that she could put aside her fear, believe that she could somehow overcome the side of her that was an animal, a butcher, an unstoppable killer. But it sounded like Naruto was telling her she couldn't. So she argued. "But Wolverine's always telling me to use non-lethal takedowns, and you don't seem particularly bloodthirsty." Naruto sighed as he walked past her to his bed and fell onto it with his back. He patted a spot next to him, indicating she should join him, to which she did, but he remained silent. For a full minute he seemed to be lost in his thoughts before he said, "I don't know enough about Wolverine to say whether it's the same for him, but whenever I get into a serious fight, you would probably be able to see it for yourself. I tend to become more and more silent, as well as ruthlessly efficient the longer a fight goes on. Provided, of course, I think I am up against a worthy opponent. In the end, if the fight lasts long enough, I'd probably do something that outside of combat normally wouldn't even occur to me of doing in a fight." Holding back also became assured. "I am sorry, that explanation was horrible." Perhaps to anyone else that explanation would have been terrible, but Laura felt like she could make sense of what he was saying. No, I think I kind of understand. I've seen old videos of Logan going into berserker rages, and even now that he's got that handled, something has always bothered me. Why is it that despite the fact that he knows more than 100 different martial art styles, Logan still prefers to use his claws and fight the way he fights? It's like he is trying to express a darker part of himself using his claws or something. "That's exactly it," Naruto said with a rather serious look in his visible amethyst eye. "So make no mistake, I can't fix you and magically turn you into something you are not, something we are not. You, me, Logan and others like us, we're all killers, we've just learned that there is a better way to live. What I can do, however, and what I intend to do from the moment we met, is show you that even if we are killers and monsters, we can also be just as human as everyone else. And as for our dark sides, no one ever said that we couldn't use them for the good of the world." Laura weighed those words in her head before giving a nod. There was more to them than she currently fully understood, she could perceive that much. Would her other side come to express itself in the way she thought, much like Naruto and Logan's, and if so, what would that look like? She knew she was far more ruthless and lethal when under the effects of the trigger scent, but she also had no memory what she did when she was like. All she knew was that even Chimera, one of the most terrifying and heartless monsters she had ever met, was scared of her when she was under the influence of the trigger scent. What did that say about her, and did she really want to bring that out of her? She needed more information before she could come to any conclusion, and it necessitated her asking certain extremely personal question, then praying Naruto answered, instead kicking her out. Hesitantly she asked. How did they break you? Naruto didn't answer immediately, but he lost the soft smile he'd been wearing up until that moment. Thankfully he wasn't angry at her, or if he was, he at the very least didn't show it. Eventually he replied. My mom and dad died on the same day I was born, so my early years were spent in an orphanage. However, due to certain circumstances that occurred on the day I was born that I don't want to get into right now, I was reviled by the citizens of my home village. It wasn't something that was my fault, I had no control over it, and yet I was hated for it, much like mutants are hated by humans for having one extra gene. Was it the whisker marks on your cheeks? They make you look feral. Laura asked, quickly explaining her reasoning. She'd long since noted that Naruto had longer than normal canines and enhanced senses. The whisker marks on each of his cheeks also hinted at some kind of possible animal heritage. With him being from another universe, anything was possible. Perhaps people were not as tolerant of those with animal features there as here on Earth. A strangled sound that seemed like a cross between a choke, a cough and laugh forced its way out of Naruto's mouth as his face did something funny, as if undecided on what expression it should settle on. Finally it settled on disbelief and amusement. Naruto was so caught off guard by her comment that he chuckled in disbelief before shaking his head and replying. No, the average person on my homeworld has far more diverse genetic traits than the average human on Earth. Something like my whisker marks wouldn't even make people blink in surprise in my homeland. I might eventually tell you what it was that caused this hatred someday, but it's still a military secret and it's not even that important to the story I'm telling you right now. The important part was that I was hated and I didn't know why at the time. Most people reacted to me in one of two ways. Either I was persecuted by anyone and everyone nearby. Or? Laura asked. She did not like where this was going. Obviously Naruto was similar to her and had had a rough life, but this sounded like he was still a toddler when people began persecuting her. Laura had at least had her mother to shelter her until she was nearing the prepubescent stage. Or, I was ignored and ostracized by those around me. In other words, I either received negative attention and potentially a beating or no attention at all. Neither option was good for the mental health of a growing 3-year-old child. Naruto said a little sadly before adding. For the most part everyone at the orphanage simply pretended I didn't exist unless to make sure I had my meals, which were never filling enough. I was literally kept away from the other kids, given chores to keep me busy and never given a hand when I needed it unless withholding help would actually harm me in some way. Allowing me to come to physical harm was a big no-no, cause the ninjas had big plans for my future. Anyway, one cold winter evening when I was just 3 years old I screwed up one of my chores in a big way. Big enough that the matron of the orphanage decided to throw me out of the orphanage for the night. When you were just 3 years old. Laura's face bore an aghast expression before her eyes lit up with a burning fury that startled even him as she scowled while coldly saying. I would like to meet this woman and flay the skin off her bones with my claws. Suddenly smiling, Naruto snapped his fingers at her and said. That right there is good. Threats of violence aside, a normal human would react angrily to the knowledge that a child was subjected to something even as mild as that. Laura could have sworn she heard him add under his breath, at least on this earth, but maybe she was just imagining things. Ignoring everything else he said, Laura latched on the one thing that stood out and demanded. You call that mild? Sure, she had been through things infinitely more severe than that, just not at the age of 3. Even the Weapon X program wouldn't risk her life like that, especially when her mutant ability hadn't kicked in at that age. Naruto simply nodded as the mood from his earlier outburst became solemn again. With a sigh that made it clear he really wasn't that into recounting his past, he said. Compared to the hell you and I have been through, a night in the snow was mild punishment. Not that I spent more than an hour locked out that night. No, my fate was something far worse. That situation was nothing more than the perfect opportunity for a root retrieval team to pick me up. Laura could practically feel the all capital letters in that word and guessed that it was likely a shady spy organization similar to S.H.I.E.L.D. So for confirmation she asked. What's root? Again Naruto's face did something funny, but a little different this time upon hearing the question. It was as if his face was purposely struggling to keep how much he disliked Root from showing in his expression. He wasn't succeeding very much at it, and Laura found it rather amusing, but then she'd probably have a hard time hiding her feeling about the Weapon X facility if she was asked. Eventually Naruto replied. On my world, ninjas are the soldiers and guardians of the country more often than the assassins and thieves they seem to be on Earth. When we are not doing things related to national security, the village hires us out like mercenaries for a price. Clients present missions to the village, which charges a fee dependent on the difficulty of the mission and allocates a team of ninjas of appropriate skill level to successfully complete said mission. These missions can range from something as mundane as babysitting and dog walking to something worthy of an Earth spy novel, like the assassination of a high-profile target and destabilizing another nation's government. That said, the vast majority of the average ninja's duties revolve around things more in line with acting as a protection detail, bandit elimination, border patrol, policing cities and towns, manning observation stations, tracking down and rescuing kidnapping victims, the annihilation of drug and slavery rings, etc. etc. Things in line with what you'd expect from a soldier or a police officer. It sounded a lot more complicated than just things that a soldier or a police officer do. In fact, just the list of things he'd mentioned had duties that every single three-lettered federal organization in America covered. And all of them were taken care of by regular shinobi. Which meant Root had a different function. I am guessing then that Root was a ninja organization that handled the darker things like assassinations then. No, regular Anbu Black Ops, our ninja special forces units covered stuff like that. Root on the other hand, Root was much worse. They did the things that even the Black Ops wouldn't touch with a 50-foot pole, things so inhuman and unthinkable that ninjas from regular Anbu and the mainstream forces would try and kill them, for if their secrets ever got out. They believed that their job was to do the unthinkable in the shadows so that the rest of my village and by extension my nation wouldn't have to. Often they operated outside of the Hokage, our military leader's purview, answering only to a man named Danzo Shimura, the Hokage's rival. And they took you to become one of them. She guessed, but surprisingly Naruto shook his head in denial. My father was the previous Hokage, so they couldn't just take me out of the limelight for long without drawing attention to the shadows they operated in, attention no one wanted. No, because I was just a 3-year-old, they believed that if they influenced the way I thought from such an early age, they would be better able to control me later down the road. They succeeded too, or at least partially. Naruto admitted. He clearly didn't like Root, but he also had a strange pride, or was it respect, when he talked of his experience with them. It didn't make sense to her, but what it did do was make Laura even more curious about Naruto. What did they do to you? It was perhaps insensitive to ask such a question in that way, but Laura believed she was beginning to understand Naruto a bit better. Where a somewhat normal person like Nariko would have been offended by her tone, her question and the timing, Naruto didn't seem to care all that much. More importantly, she felt like she was beginning to grasp something, some kind of insight, the more Naruto talked about his life, so she wasn't even thinking of being tactful. They gave me the thing I craved most at that time of my life, positive attention. It was such an alien experience to me back then. I had no allies and I utterly lacked any understanding of anything, so I was drawn to it, like a moth to a flame. Naruto confessed. Everyone else insulted me and degraded me or outright ignored me, so a simple act of kindness went a very long way to gaining my trust. Before I knew it, I was beginning to trust these people and believe them, which quickly turned into me believing in them and their ways. Indoctrination. She thought. Effective too, if things were going in the direction she believed them to be going. Children were naturally dependent on adults and so far everyone in his life at that age had been anything but dependable. So the first sign of affection from someone would have naturally made him trust them. Continuing his story, Naruto said. They kept me nice and warm that first night, gave me a nice meal and a bed to rest in, before delivering me to orphanage early in the morning, just as the matron came to let me in. However, after that day they visited me every night for a whole year. Little by little, showing me less and less positive attention, while convincing me to give up my desire for it. They convinced me that my emotions were not necessary, then they convinced me to let my dreams and desires, things natural to a 3-year-old, fade into nothing. Then they showed me the power of chakra. Within a year, I had the mind of a killer and some basic training that would years later become the foundation of my ninja prowess. They were subtle. Laura commented. Her mind was still going through everything that had been said, and she just knew there was so much more to the story that had been left unsaid. Indeed they were. From my point of view, I wasn't manipulated into that life, I wanted it. As far as I was concerned, I sacrificed all those things willingly and truly wanted to become a killer. And with the completion of my indoctrination Root began to teach me things, arming me with the tools I would need to be that killer. They taught me how to read, write and count, how to access my chakra, to sneak around successfully, to be invisible to everyone around me, including fully trained and extremely paranoid ninjas, and finally to kill with ease. My training would have gone on longer, but then my future best friend turned 4 years old and got herself kidnapped. This last part was surprising for Laura, Naruto had a best friend. The Weapon X program didn't allow for friendships or any other kinds of attachments, and from what she'd gotten from this story so far, Root was Naruto's world's equivalent of Weapon X. So how did he have any attachments as significant as a best friend? That would no doubt be answered as the story progressed, so Laura asked. What happened? Root allowed Hinata Hyuga, the Hyuga clan heiress, to be kidnapped by an enemy ninja as a test for me. They manipulated things so that the kidnapper's only safe way out of the village was on a path that led straight to me. My job was to kill him. Naruto explained. There was obviously more to the tale, things happening in the background, but Naruto neglected mention them. They weren't worried you'd fail? Laura asked. Killing an adult ninja had to be tough for a 4-year-old, even if said 4-year-old was himself a ninja in training. There is no room for failure in Root, but in the event that I did not kill him, there was a team of operatives ready to pick up the kidnapper and Hinata outside the village and then use the kidnapper as a political bargaining chip or something. Naruto didn't sound too convinced that this would have happened. So did you kill him? Laura asked, both curious about this and somewhat saddened that Naruto might have had to see death at such an earlier age. However, Naruto shook his head in the negative before grinning darkly as he replied. No, I didn't kill him. Though in the end he probably wished I had. Instead I castrated him and then immobilized him. Laura blinked, disbelief apparent on her face as she asked. Castrated him? Isn't a little extreme? Especially for a 4-year-old remained unsaid. Naruto merely shrugged, a slightly blush adorned his cheeks as he replied. There are only so many places that are within stabbing range of toddler with a kunai. I just picked the most painful, plus it was revenge. Well, sort of. The Hidden Cloud Ninja Village had a habit of kidnapping women who were important to me in some way to turn them into breeders due to the unique bloodline abilities they carried, basically their mutations. Thankfully they always failed and I was happy to foil that attempt. A distinctly female righteous anger seemed to fall over Laura Kinney like a heavy blanket upon hearing those words. To be kidnapped for the sake of becoming breeding material for the sake of another village. Something in her snapped at the thought and even Naruto found himself scooting backwards and away from her, discreetly. This Hidden Cloud Village was lucky that they were literally a universe apart or she would make it her mission to find those responsible and make them pay for this deplorable practice in the most painful ways she could imagine, and she could think of a lot. In that case you let him off too easily if he was willing to kidnap a 4-year-old so that they could breed her for her mutation. You should have made him suffer. Ignoring her last comment and the visible discomfort he felt at her words, Naruto tried to get things back on track, saying. Anyways, there were always tests within tests en route, and the man who had kidnapped Hinata Hyuga was part of a political envoy from a rival nation that had just signed a conditional peace treaty with my nation that very day. In fact, he was the head negotiator. Killing him in public would have created an international scandal, but I would have gotten away with it. The top-tier ninja from a rival nation successfully infiltrates enemy territory and kidnaps a high-value target but gets killed during exfiltration by a 4-year-old out past his bedtime. It's not something any village would want made public and would be quickly swept under the rug. If ninjas, outside of matters of national security, had to offer up their services as mercenaries and they had direct competition from other ninja villages, then Laura could understand how that would have been bad. If it became public that mere kids from your enemy's village can take out your top ninjas, then why would any clients come to you anymore? Everyone would immediately try and contract the other village. I can somewhat understand the reasoning behind Root putting you through such a test. However, since you didn't kill him, what happened? Naruto physically winced as he recalled the memory. The whole village woke up due to the man's screams and he was quickly arrested. The fact that he was very clearly trying to kidnap the heiress of one of the biggest clans in Konoha after personally signing the treaty with other Kumo delegates made him and by extension his whole village look bad in the eyes of the public. As compensation, my village demanded a special young lady from his village to be brought to Konoha as a hostage or they would mount a ton of political pressure and the most devastatingly one-sided smear campaign in the history of my world. A smear campaign. The idea sounded simply absurd when you considered that these were ninjas they were talking about. Yet Laura could clearly see how this would work even as Naruto began explaining it. Konoha was in the right and Kumo looked deceptive. Obviously all ninjas are taught to be deceptive, but not to show it to civilians. This case was pretty clear-cut for any civilian clients to see. Kumo had called for a peace treaty, signed it, and then utterly violated it within 24 hours. Clients simply wouldn't trust them and give their business to any number of rival ninja villages and nations if that got out. Then there was the fact that I was a 4-year-old boy who took out a jounin, capable of sneaking into the Hyuga clan ninjas who all have omnidirectional vision that can see through walls and see things for kilometers away, and then successfully kidnapping the clan leader's daughter before successfully sneaking back out. If that got out, Kumo would instantly become the laughingstock of all the ninja villages. So the situation was bad for business and bad politically, plus while we desired peace more than anyone, we were not weaker militarily speaking. Thus there were only two options: give us our hostage and we would make this whole scandal go away, refuse and we were going to crucify them. Naturally they accepted and I got an older sister. What about the Hokage? I am pretty sure he wasn't happy to find out you were wandering around at night. Then there is Root, you disobeyed an order. Even if the end result sounds like it was much better for your village and country, I am pretty sure they weren't too happy that you didn't kill when instructed to. Laura pointed out. Some of them weren't happy, but Danzo expects his soldiers to be capable of thinking things through logically. It's for this reason that he eliminates their emotions. He never wanted obedient dogs that do every single thing he says and can't form thoughts of their own. Hell, the old bastard personally defended me when the Hokage tried to grill me on what I had done and presented me as a new prototype ninja to the Hokage. The results kinda spoke for themselves, so it was hard for even the Hokage to disagree with him. Naruto said with a shrug. Indeed. 4-year-old takes out a top-tier ninja from rival ninja village. You might have had help and things might have been skewed in your favor, but all that mattered was that a 4-year-old had beaten one of a rival nation's top ninja. It must have gained your village a huge amount of political clout, and that hostage you mentioned earlier must have been incredibly important if she is all your village demanded. So regardless of how it happened, the end result spoke for themselves. Incidentally, hostage wasn't used for breeding, was she? As she asked the question, that righteous anger seemed to come back and Naruto froze like a deer caught in headlights. Nope, Yujito became my big sister and well that's not important, but Konoha doesn't tolerate that breed practice. Anyway, I can't talk about a lot of what happened next cause it's classified military secrets, but a lot of politics later, and I found myself undergoing training that was to be overseen by Kakashi Haddock and Jiraiya of the Sannin when he was in town. I was being turned into a weapon for my nation. The Hokage understood this and accepted it, but he also ensured that the ones who would train me would be some of the most morally upstanding people you'd ever find amongst ninja kind. Though they sure had their work cut out for them when it came to me and later on my future team. At the mention of his, Naruto's tone almost took on a wistful quality. His team was obviously very important to him and he seemed to hold this Kakashi and Jiraiya in high regard, so Laura asked about them. So what was this Kakashi and Jiraiya of the Sannin like? Naruto smiled and said. I don't think that's fair. I've been talking quite a bit about myself, so now it's your turn. Tell me a bit about how you grew up and after that we will talk about Jiraiya and Kakashi. Though I will say this about those two. If I was to describe them in a single word, I'd call them the biggest perverts I have ever and likely ever will meet. But sweet Kami, were they strong. He was right, this whole time he'd been speaking about his life, the things he'd been through and the people he'd met. It was only fair for him to pose questions of his own and for her to answer them as honestly as she could. So far Naruto had not lied, he told when he didn't want to talk about something, but he had not lied yet, so neither would she. My earliest memories are of my mother reading to me from children's storybooks while pretending to read to me The Art of War by Sun Tzu. I remember being trained by my sensei in various forms of traditional Japanese and Chinese martial arts, but also being shown immense kindness by that man. I remember being shown love in that hellhole, even as I was being trained to kill my enemies in the most efficient and ruthless ways known to man. And then I was forced to kill everyone who had ever shown me love and kindness, the only exception being my cousin and aunt. I still ruined their lives just by meeting them and getting to know them, but they changed my life for the better. It was not fair. Life rarely is. He replied calmly with a tone that told her he very much sympathized with her. She wasn't doing this right, stories began at the beginning. Naruto himself had done so and explained things clearly for her understanding. So she would do the same. I suppose I should start at the beginning. As you know, I am the genetic clone of James Howlett, better known in his civilian identity as Logan and Wolverine in his superhero identity. Or rather I should have been had the Weapon X program been able properly clone me from a genetic sample they'd taken from him. After 22 failures, my mother intervened, duplicated the X chromosome in Logan's DNA to create me, and then carried me for 9 months. I was a weapon created by Dr. Sarah Kinney for the facility, but I was also her child. For all of her mistakes and the things she allowed to happen to me, she loved me and wanted me to live. Any good parent desires at least that much for their children. My parents did too, they even died for me. Naruto said that as if it was the most obvious thing in the world, she couldn't help but smile ever slightly. My mother died because of me. As you know, when an organization like Root or the Weapon X program want a weapon, they make sure they have a means to control it. With you they indoctrinated you into thinking their cause was right and doing things in a way they desired. With me they repeatedly exposed me to a chemical compound, a trigger scent, that as the name implies, triggered a berserker rage in me. I have no control over this, and I kill anyone and anything in my path. They used this trigger scent on my mother when they deemed her love for me a liability, and I killed her. She confessed then looked away, waiting for condemnation, disgust, anything from Naruto, now that she'd told him her dirty little secret. His parents had died for him out love, she had personally killed her mother. Things were not the same. Instead Laura received the last thing she expected from Naruto. In one smooth move, he pulled her into a hug as he said, "I am sorry to hear that." At first she resisted but then relaxed in the following silence, and to her surprise tears began to roll down her eyes. "Why am I crying? This happened years ago." Even her voice cracked, much to her annoyance. "Because you loved her then, and you still do." Naruto calmly replied. There was an understanding and warmth to his words that simultaneously wanted to bask in and question how it was possible for someone like them to have. Naruto was a walking breathing contradiction to her. So human and full of life, yet unquestionably a cold and efficient killer. Isolated and hated from an early age yet so kind and full of understanding. It didn't make sense to her, but then it didn't need. As they sat on his bed, with Naruto's arms wrapped around her, Laura decided she liked this. Eventually they began talking again and would continue to do so well into the morning. The duo would share all kinds of little things about each other's lives and experiences as they sat comfortably on Naruto's bed. Unknown to her and perhaps even himself, she was being given a glimpse of the real Naruto as he opened himself up a little bit to someone for the first time since coming to Earth. Thanks to some privacy seals Naruto had installed in the room, no one who Naruto didn't want noticing learned of this midnight exchange save for a few beings that far transcended humanity and a pair of nosy mutants. Some smiled, some frowned, and one decided she should pay this strange boy so full of life a visit in the morning. VVV. It was somewhere before sunrise that Laura finally left and Naruto found himself cursing the fuzzy feeling he felt inside chest cause of her visit. He already knew what it was. When they first met, he'd just come out of cryostasis and said the first thing that came to his still regenerating brain, which was to call her beautiful. He normally would have kept something like that to himself, but he wasn't thinking straight at the time. However, that didn't mean he was wrong. Naruto still very much agreed with his past assessment of Laura, more so than ever even. After spend time talking to her about his life and then listening to her talk about her own experience in the Weapon X facility and her subsequent escape, Naruto had come to the conclusion that he really liked her and they had a lot in common to boot, outside of being killers. In short, he found her attractive and wanted to get to know her better. Still, what would be the point? He thankfully dodged the topic of his past relationships whenever Hinata came up in the conversation by referring to her as his best friend when she had been so much more. And Naruto had done enough research of 21st century Earth customs to know that polygamous relationships were not exactly a popular thing here. So Naruto did not mention any of his many romances back in the elemental nations. Some 6th, or perhaps it was 11th sense at this point told him that doing so would end poorly for him. Laura already seemed pissed enough at Kumo that she was willing to march in there and try and raze it to the ground. He did not need that anger directed at him. Especially because he believed there was a chance Laura would somehow succeed in causing him grievous injuries he would not be able to regenerate from. The righteous anger of a woman had always been something that terrified Naruto. Especially after he met his mother. In the end though, that was just it. Naruto was already aware of his skewed opinion of Laura due to her saving him from the Weapon X facility. It was common for someone rescued to see their rescuer in a certain attractive light. Hell, that's how his own mother had fallen for his father, despite thinking of Minato as girly and undependable up to that point. And Naruto was nothing if not his mother's son. Scarlet locks and amethyst eyes were only physical proof of this. Naruto was also a shinobi, and due to their lifestyle in which death could come at any moment, they tended to live every day like it was their last, and love more quickly and passionately than was accepted as normal here. That entire lifestyle just clashed horribly with what was normal on Earth, even for someone like Laura who had had an abnormal life by Earth standards. Furthermore, Naruto was in Uzumaki, and there were no ninjas more passionate and emotionally charged than the Uzumaki clan, which was he locked his emotions down with his root training logic more often than not. Unfortunately, that training wasn't working at the moment. Which was why he was meditating in the surface of Breakstone Lake, a little to the east of the X Mansion. He was couple meters into the lake at this point where he sat perfectly still and drew on the natural energies of the world while reflecting on all that had happened and the state of his heart. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. In the end, Naruto wasn't sure if he wanted to punch Wolverine in the balls or thank him for sending Laura his way last night. Maybe a little bit of both. The man was pretty crappy father material, but he genuinely cared for Laura and wanted was best for his daughter-sister clone. Unfortunately, for some reason the feral mutant had gotten it in his head that Naruto was what was best for the girl. Flashback. So did you enjoy the night? Naruto glared at the older mutant as Logan took a couple of sniffs of the air before saying. You are not covered in her scent, so at least you didn't try anything inappropriate with my daughter, or I'd have to act like a proper father and pop my claws to gut you like a fish." It was said as a joke, but there was a certain glint in the man's eyes that made it so Naruto couldn't entirely dismiss the idea that Logan might be serious. Naruto had fought the man a couple times in sparring sessions but never seriously. Internally he smiled at the idea and thought to himself. At the very least such a scenario would be interesting. Logan had found Naruto as he was eating his breakfast in the gardens, away from the eyes and questions of staff and students alike. It was also so that Naruto could process both his meeting with Emma the previous evening and the events of that night and make a decision on his next course action moving forward. "You do realize that you are the one who practically sent her my way, right? Not to mention the ease with which she accessed my room and snuck back to her dorm in the morning. She's good, but I am not buying the idea that at least you and Emma didn't plan this somehow." Between Logan's super sensitive nose and Emma's telepathy, they should have easily picked up Laura's activities. There was no way that they wouldn't have known that Laura had come to see him, and they could have easily stopped her at any time before she entered his room. In short, they wanted this to happen. Emma had said as much the evening before. Naruto just hadn't expected her to work with Wolverine of all people, those didn't exactly get along much. Logan snorted and said. "You're a little observant, I'll give you that much. I admit that I am willing and able to create opportunities for her to be around you, with the help of some of my teammates who shall not be named. However, whether I create such opportunities or not, it won't stop Laura from coming to see you. The thing she inherited most from me was not my claws or healing factor, but my stubbornness. This just makes things easier for her." Naruto felt kind of happy for Laura. She hadn't directly said it, but he'd picked up pretty easily how much she desired her father's acknowledgement and how much she valued his opinions. The fact that Wolverine was pretty much pushing her towards him would mean the world to her once she figured it out. Even so, Naruto didn't quite understand one thing, and so he asked. "Why me?" Logan didn't answer right away, instead he chose to light a cigar and inhale deeply before exhaling a blast of smoke into the air that made Naruto frown. How would this bastard like it? He started playing with smoke bombs whenever Logan was trying to eat something. Still, a subtle application of wind release prevented any contaminated air from coming near him or his delicious fried eggs and bacon. Finally Logan said. "You understand what she's been through, what those like us have been through, and you came out relatively okay. Oh, I know deep down inside you can be just as much of a monster as me if not more when the time comes, but you got a handle on that. We've both learned how to be human, but you seem to be able to actually teach this to Laura and do so quickly. That's a lesson she dearly needs at this point in her life. Can you believe she was smiling this morning?" "Huh?" Naruto voiced his confusion. Logan himself was smiling as he clearly thought back on whatever encounter he had with Laura that morning. Yet, it was like the wild mutant wasn't used to seeing his daughter smile and thought of it as an almost alien expression on her face. This didn't make sense to Naruto. He'd seen Laura smile multiple times, and it was a damn pretty smile. Soft perhaps, small even, but damn pretty. "Laura, after she left your room, she was smiling. Trust me kid, that girl don't smile." Logan explained as he looked up at the sky, obviously having picked up on Naruto's confusion somehow. The older man silently basked in the morning sunlight's gentle rays for a few seconds before continuing. "You're good for her, Naruto. You're already having a positive influence on her, and not only does she like you, you also like her. Don't deny it kid, you can fool a shit ton of people with your ninja skills, but not me." Naruto was leveled with a glare so challenging he actually found himself audibly gulping. For some time later this little fact would trouble him. How was it that he could face down a rampaging 10 tails without a hint of fear or hesitation, yet Logan had frozen him with a look? He would also wrongly conclude that Logan had other unknown powers somehow. With a nervous chuckle Naruto confessed. "I admit I find her attractive and fun to be around, plus we do understand each other better than anyone else because of what we are. Still, what then? I've promised to stick around to at least help her with her past and to find her humanity, but I also need to return to my own world eventually. It wouldn't be right to string her along and then just leave, and I doubt she'd want to abandon everything she knows and everyone she loves here on Earth and follow me to a new unknown universe. So regardless of my feelings, what would be the point? If you really feel there is no point to starting a relationship with her, then I won't push you. It's none of my business what you kids get up to anyway. However, just assuming things won't work out for you without trying is rather cowardly, and I may be mistaken, but in every spar we've had so far you've left me with the impression that you are anything but a coward." Flashback end. "That bastard." Naruto mentally growled for a moment as he thought of Wolverine's last comment. For all of his root and Anbu training, his genius intellect and calm demeanor inherited from his father, Naruto was still his mother's son. In other words, despite fully recognizing the trap for what it was, his Uzumaki pride wouldn't let Wolverine's comments slide. keep an open mind when it come to Naruhina. So when she decides to follow me to another universe and you try stopping her, who is you will be cursing out for reminding you that this was your idea. Cause such a day comes, I am gonna laugh at your misery, old man, oh yeah. Emma is also going to need a punch in the face for her part in all this. Putting his thoughts on Wolverine and Emma's antics and his vengeance against the two irritants out of his mind, Naruto focused on meditating. Breathe in. Breath out. Breathe in. Breath out. Breathe in. Breath out. The mantra played somewhere in the back of his head as Naruto sat perfectly still and released some of the tension he carried within into the environment. The water didn't even so much as ripple beneath him as nature energy gathered thickly around him and he quickly entered sage mode. Yet this time it was different. Gone were the orange rings that used to surround his eyes and denote sagehood on his world. In their place remained a series of dark purple lines and geometric shapes that ultimately looked like a cross between a ceiling formula and the pathways on a circuit board. Think of the curse mark Danzo placed on Sasuke's Shippuden in episode 210, but branching out more. As strange as it was to him, this sage mode felt strangely fitting. His right eye remained amethyst but gained silver cross in place of its pupil, a leftover from his six-path sage mode. As for lavender by Akugan, it turned dull gold. Naruto however was unaware of the visual changes to his appearance that came with his activation of sage mode, only the strange ways his new sage mode affected him. The boost of energy was about on par with what he got back in the elemental nations and most of the other things were the same, but his chakra felt slightly more robust and slightly less flexible when he melded it the nature energy of Earth. It wasn't a bad thing, just really strange to him. He intended to figure it out in future when he found a place he could really test his abilities out. But for now Naruto focused on his breathing and more importantly his inner world. One of the first things he checked upon getting a moment of quiet for himself was his seal to see if Kurama or any of the other tailed beasts had made it to Earth with him. What he'd found was not encouraging. First of all, the seal was different. Visually, the seal on his stomach was not the Tori seal he had created after gaining access to the Nine Tails chakra, nor was it the 8 trigram sealing style of the Uzumaki clan his father had placed on him. No, it looked like a 9-armed swirling pinwheel encircled by 9 tomo, the comma-like marks in the iris of the first stage of the Sharingan. They look like a bunch of 9. The seal was far stronger too, he wouldn't have been surprised if it could hold back Kagaya herself with extreme ease. But how had he gotten it? The inside of the seal, it, while not strictly speaking empty, completely lacked any of the tailed beast's presence. In their place was a large reservoir of chakra that felt more powerful than anything he had experienced, including Kagaya and Hagoromo Otsutsuki. So powerful in fact that if the seal was to suddenly fail, he feared that all that power would almost instantly tear him apart. This chakra felt a lot like Hagoromo and Kagaya's power too, but also different. As if it was changing into something new, something like him or rather what he could eventually become. As he was contemplating this, Naruto was unaware of the massive effect his meditation was having on the environment outside his seal. Or more specifically, who his senjutsu was attracting at the moment. It was to be an event that would shape his life for many years to come. The air grew clear, cool and crisper by the second. Flowers in the courtyard of the X mansion and across its many gardens quickly began to bloom, growing ever more vibrantly colorful by the second. The trees of the forest looked greener, the soil healthier and the waters of the lake a clear crystal blue. Even the animals were responding. Schools of different kinds of fish located in the lake swam in wide circles beneath where Naruto sat, while flocks of birds mimicked their formations in the skies above. Woodland critters and the occasional deer gathered on the banks and just stared at Naruto, as if longing to cross the water and reach out to him. However, that was not all. James Howlett, Laura Kinney, Henry McCoy, Nick Gleason, Victor Borkowski and a few others emerged from the tree line and just stood along the shore as if in a trance. Every one of these mutants feeling their animal instincts drawing them to this place to bear witness to the descent of a goddess. To witness nature itself commune with a young sage sitting on the lake. Naruto was aware of none of this, for even his body had entered into a trance-like state, yet his mind remained active. He didn't realize when his mindscape changed from the massive underground cavern which held the one-time prison of the mighty Kyuubi no Yoko to a vast empty wide expanse that went on forever. Naruto quite literally felt like he'd been in this wide expanse the whole time, and yet he remembered having stood before the seal just moments ago. The one thing he was fully aware of, however, was that he was no longer alone in his mind. Yet he could instantly tell that this presence was on a completely different level from that Emma or any other human telepath. He couldn't just throw it out whenever he felt like it. That actually scared him somewhat, yet he also felt warmth, like that time he met his mother chakra ghost when she helped him control Kurama's power. The silky smooth yet motherly voice spoke into his ear as if carried by the wind itself and said, "You drink deeply from my power, child, yet you do not claim it for yourself. Why is this?" Some instinct within Naruto told him he was talking to a goddess, and not just any goddess, but a powerful nature goddess many times more powerful than Kagaya. Allowing himself a sneak peek at how powerful she was, his sensory powers showed him that this goddess could influence nature on planetary scale and was even stronger than that. It would be prudent to be polite to such a being. A mirthful chuckle filled the air as the voice said in a sultry tone. Taking a sneak peek at a lady's assets. An atomic blush instantly replaced Naruto's calm demeanor at those words, so much so that he couldn't even stutter an excuse and found himself tongue-tied. Huh. While he was a disciple of Jiraiya and a student of Kakashi, thus all too familiar with Iro ninjutsu and peeking on beautiful ladies. The idea of peeking on a goddess practically made his brain short-circuit for a second there. In response to this, the goddess's chuckle suddenly turned into a full-blown belly laugh at his expense, and outside of Naruto's mindscape every bird in a 5-mile radius simultaneously burst into song. The same song but in 100 different variations. It was quite frankly creepy to any humans that might have been paying attention. They would never know it was in response to the most powerful nature goddess's laughter. An ocean of warmth suddenly enveloped the embarrassed retreated ninja as the voice said. I am just kidding, little one. My days can get awfully boring at times, and so when I recently sensed someone guzzling up a chunk of my power, I thought I should take a look and determine their motives. Naruto sighed in relief at hearing this. The goddess before him seemed a hell of a lot more reasonable than those of the Otsutsuki clan. He'd already known that the gods of Earth were pretty reasonable individuals and often helped humans in defending their homeworld. The Asgardian named Thor being the biggest example of this, but not the only one. Still, to know about this and to experience it firsthand were two entirely different things, and it left Naruto feeling a good deal of relief. That said, Naruto had to make one thing clear first. I am not a thief. Yes indeed, with every breath you drink deeply from my power and mix it with your own surprisingly strong life energy, augmenting it, empowering it, and then releasing it as you breath out. This new energy spreads out into the world, reinforcing everything touched by me that it comes into contact with. It's amazing, the last time I saw anyone aside from me and a few other beings replicate something like this was long before the birth of humanity and the gods worshipped nowadays. Yes, you are no thief. If not for this fact, I would have undoubtedly struck you down the first time you drew from my powers. But now I am fascinated by you remained unsaid. Naruto felt incredibly nervous at the idea that he had come so close to death without even knowing it. Seriously, he could tell that while he could probably put up an impressive fight if he went all out against this goddess, she'd utterly destroy him within minutes if the second she decided to take things seriously. She was just that much more powerful. I see. In that case, I apologize for not asking first. On my homeworld, our gods did not interact with humanity much, and those that did were alien gods from another world that sought the destruction of my world. If I had known about you and your dominion over this world's nature energy, I would have asked first before using my world sage arts. Naruto had yet to physically see this goddess, yet he somehow felt her nod in acceptance before she said. Well, that explains a couple of things about you, child. You look human enough to pass for one of my own children. You've even been touched by their evolution. However, you have the smell of another reality, and you are undoubtedly a mixed child, with blood both alien and divine, flowing through your veins. It explains why you are teetering on the precipice of divinity, ready to fall over at the slightest nudge. Are you prepared for immortality, child, to watch almost every other human you have ever known die and turn to dust scattered in the wind while you remain unchanged by the passing of time? Her words, while not said with any cruel or malicious intention, were like a knife to the heart. Naruto was a ninja who believed in the will of fire and in Uzumaki at that. More importantly, he was an orphan who had never known the love of family until he'd met his team, and even then it wasn't the same thing as being raised by a father, mother and siblings. It was the one experience that Sasuke and Hinata had, he truly lacked. So to put it simply, family and friends were the most important thing to Naruto, and while this goddess hadn't mentioned any specifics, watching everyone you'd ever known die obviously implied his family. Unless of course he died early or his family became immortal. Either option bothered him greatly. The feeling of comfort and embrace surrounded Naruto as the goddess said. I see I've upset you. Do not fret, child, you are not a godling yet. Though it warms my heart to know you would be a better choice than most and at the very least take divinity seriously. I must be going now, Naruto Uzumaki. Despite still being shaken, Naruto scrounged up the curiosity to ask. How do you know my name? In response, he got the impression of young woman smiling happily at him, eyes sparkling with amusement as she replied. You cannot remain unknown to me so long as you stand on this planet. I am sure you can figure out why, after all you did take a peek at this old girl. Hiding of any embarrassment he felt at the thought of what a naked goddess might look like, damn you Jiraiya. Comprehension struck him like a bolt of lightning as Naruto said. You are connected to everything, aren't you? Her happiness spiked as she replied. Exactly. Naruto could tell that the goddess was about to leave, the conversation had been winding down and she had already satisfied her curiosity. So whatever else he wanted to ask needed to be asked fast, and there was something he really wanted to know. May I know your name, O goddess? Naruto got the impression that the goddess was cocking her head sideways in thought for some reason before she replied. I have many names and many forms, though I have neglected to show you any, but I suppose it would be simplest for you if you called me Gi or Mother Nature, whichever is easier. And yes, you have my permission. Permission? Naruto asked in surprise, trying to connect to what she was saying and failing. Use your sage arts and draw on my power. Provided of course your moral compass does not deviate further from what is good and righteous. I can stomach a lot of acts, but some things will not be tolerated. Thankfully, even at your most extreme, your actions would be in the range of what I would consider tolerable. Deviate from that however, and there will be dire consequence. Gia's warning was beyond stern, a promise of the inescapable all-consuming wrath only a goddess could deliver. Yet it was also strange, as if she was looking into what might be and warning him against it, rather than what was. Understood, and thank you for this. He shouldn't have understood this, a normal person couldn't truly understand what he was feeling. Yet he did. Ever since Hagoromo had granted him the Yang Seal and 6-Path Sage mode, Naruto had been able to perceive the imperceptible with his senses. I can see that you do understand. Good, I'm relieved. In that case it's my pleasure to meet you, Naruto-kun. Don't be a stranger, I get oh so terribly bored, and which goddess doesn't love a strapping young man? The flirtatious tone with which she said those words left no guesses to the implications of her words. Grrhk. Blushing a darker red than his hair as his mind conjured all kinds steamy images, Naruto cursed Jiraiya in his thoughts. He was no stranger to sex, but with a goddess. An image of a woman whose beauty was literally indescribable suddenly filled his head. It was an image that had not been born from Naruto thoughts, but projected into his mind, and this woman was very much naked. Well, naked save for several tree vines that were covering her privates in much the same way as Naruto's sexy jutsu female form used smoke to cover her privates. Then the naked woman winked at him before the whole image vanished from his without a trace. Naruto suddenly felt lightheaded and could have sworn that had he any control over his physical body at the moment, he would have probably fainted. Ahahahaha. I haven't had this much fun in eons. Gia roared with another loud belly laugh, even as her presence faded out of existence. Before Naruto knew it, he was alone again, but also very aware of all the different life signatures surrounding him outside his midscape. Thankfully by some miracle his body was completely disconnected from wherever his mind had been, and thus he was not sporting an impressive erection, or this would have been super awkward. Up until that moment, it seemed Gia's sheer power had blanketed the area and hidden all life from him despite being in sage mode, but now Naruto was acutely aware of everything alive in his immediate surrounding. With a sigh he opened his eyes and spotted the entire X-Men team, several students and director Valerie Cooper standing on the shore watching him, along with a multitude of animals. Some of them like Wolverine, Beast and Laura even looked a little disoriented, as if they were coming out of a trance. Perhaps they perceived a bit of what was going on. I need to ask. Sighing, Naruto turned to the gathered animals and said. She's gone now, you should return to whatever you were doing before she arrived. And just like that every animal dispersed to go do whatever they naturally did at that time of the day. Only apparently whatever he had said wasn't what he thought he said. As the X-Men continued to stare at him with an odd fascination, Naruto asked as he casually walked over water to them. What? Wolverine was the first to ask and he was looking very concerned as he did so. Naruto, what language was that you were just speaking? Frowning at the man's question as he stepped onto dry land, Naruto thought about the various languages of Earth. Over the previous week his research had pointed out that there were many languages on Earth and he had yet to have an encounter with any of them. However, in the week since he'd woken up Naruto had been wondering why he understood everyone. He obviously didn't speak English and he doubted that the written form of the language was even remotely similar to his native language. Yet he understood everything he heard or read perfectly. He found it completely suspicious, but he had never really bothered to investigate it too deeply, at least until now. Even so, he had more important things to do than wonder how it was that he understood a previously unknown language, or why everyone was looking at him like he was crazy for talking to animals and for said animals obeying him. Jugo did it all the time, it wasn't so strange here. Was it? Perhaps animals were just dumber on this world. Instead of voicing this, Naruto replied. The same language I am always speaking. Why? It really wasn't, kid, and I think I know why. But first tell me, what did you mean by she's gone? Who was here? Wolverine demanded. He seemed both upset and worried. Naruto understood worried, especially if he had sensed Gia. She was an unbelievably powerful goddess after all. A super powerful goddess decided to say hi after noticing my presence here. She was just curious and wanted to make conversation. Naruto explained but neglected to reveal Gia's name. Maybe she wouldn't mind revealing her identity, but he would ask her first. She was decent enough to not smite him when he basically drawing on her power without her permission, so at the very least he wanted to return that decency. In response Wolverine merely sighed and said. Well, that explains it. I'll speak, huh? You never said you were a god. Naruto frowned at he wasn't a god. Godlike maybe, a god slayer perhaps and maybe even demigod if you squinted at his status as transmigrant in the right way, but not quite a god. Even Gia has said he wasn't one yet. But, I'm not. VVV. It was after one lengthy conversation in which Naruto tried to explain to everyone present exactly why he wasn't a god, much to Wolverine's amusement, that Scott brought up a different equally important matter. Due to the Nimrod incident and Purifier attack before that, the senior X-Men had charged Wolverine with upping the new X-Men's training regimen. Which Logan was more than happy to do cause they were far below his standards. However, before he could get into the meat and bones of what he had planned for them, the kids were due a little training exercise to better assess their abilities. It was a way to see exactly what they were capable of and how far he could push them before everyone except his daughter dropped dead of exhaustion. It also gave him and the senior X-Men a chance to hear the evaluation and opinion of Naruto, a ninja from another universe. An opinion that Naruto would gain by sparring with the kids himself. Having fought against Arete alongside Psylocke, Nightcrawler and Colossus, Wolverine already knew that Naruto was way above the junior team's league. It would be less of a fight and more of him simply toying with them in probably humiliating and amusing ways. Still the brats needed it. After Nimrod and the Purifiers, they were getting too big for their own britches and someone needed to knock them off their high horses and remind them that there was always someone better than them out there. Over the week you've been here with us Naruto. You've been incredibly compliant and patient with us, for which I want to say thank you. Scott began, drawing on all the charisma he was known for and cementing the fact that he was the leader of the X-Men. He might not have been the smartest, bravest, strongest, fastest or most powerful member of the team, but he sure knew how to talk and get people to listen. It's no problem Mr. Summers. If you had shown up out of the blue on my world, even the most benevolent ninja village I know of would have been at least as cautious as you've been with me. Honestly I will simply take your words as a compliment and a sign of how much you care about your students. Naruto replied, sounding as humble as ever. His nice demeanor was so sincere it almost made Logan forget that Naruto was another apex predator. Scott nodded in gratitude before saying. That said, I think it's about time we extend a bit more trust to you. So far you've been compliant with our every request and listened to our advice on any matter we brought up. From now on though, we think it would be great for you to go out into the city whenever you wish to do so. Both so that you may experiencing the variety of human culture on this earth and so that you may access more information from libraries and individuals who might be able to get you home but do not live on this property. Provided of course that you keep Ms. Braddock informed whenever you leave and she accompanies you. Seeing as the X-Men have chose her as your minder and the government has left you in our care, she is held responsible for any actions you take. Should you do something US government doesn't approve of or considers a crime, we will all be held responsible and punished for it. So please consult with her whenever you come across things you don't understand. It will save us a lot of problems, otherwise go nuts. Naruto actually smiled upon hearing that. It wasn't a secret that he was remarkably curious about his fellow ninja and that they had both wanted to question each other for some time. They just hadn't really had time to sit down and talk yet. Now though, he'd exploit this opportunity for all it was worth. Thank you for your consideration Mr. Summers. I will be careful not to cause the X-Men or mutant kind any problems. I'm also sure it will be lots of fun to hang out with a fellow ninja. That's why we chose her. Scott said with a shrug before continuing. Two more things before I let you go though. We've called in a few favors with the Fantastic Four's leader Dr. Reed Richard and he's freed up his schedule for you this evening. If you've brushed up on our world's history then you probably know that there likely isn't a more intelligent person on Earth. Not to mention he's very experienced at traveling to alternate realities. In short, he wants to scan you for your quantum signature and use it to find your home universe. I can go home? The hope in Naruto's voice was heartbreaking to hear. Logan knew the young man enough to know that he didn't actually dislike Earth, he just really wanted to go home. What he was in a rush to find there wasn't something he was privy to. Emma might have been cooperating with him to push Laura and Naruto towards each other, but she kept anything she'd been told by him in confidence, secret. It actually made him respect the blonde woman a little more. But the tactless shrug, Scott replied. I don't know. The science is way beyond my head, but from what I've gathered Reed will at least be able to find your home. How long this takes is anyone's guess and if he can't help, however unlikely that is, Psylocke has a brother who might be able to. So there are plenty of options. Thank you. The words were a lot more meaningful than the other times Naruto had expressed his gratitude to Cyclops. as if they came from a deeper place this time. After a moment of silence, Naruto finally asked with a voice that, while laced with hope, was duller than earlier. "What's the other thing?" Wolverine took this as his cue to step into the conversation, saying, "I'd like you to participate in training exercise with the new X-Men. The kids have won 2 major battles and we believe it's gotten to their heads. I'd like you to knock them down a few pegs so they don't get overconfident the next time they go out into the field. That, and I'd like your personal assessment of their abilities afterwards." Logan had been straightforward and to the point about what he wanted, like a soldier. As fellow soldier, Naruto had nodded in understanding and acceptance as he replied, "No problem. After every 2 or 3 successful mission I would beat the crap out of my subordinates back in Konoha. It kept them on their toes and reminded them they were not invincible. Well, if we are doing this then I better go prepare my strategy." Logan frowned slightly at hearing that and reminded the retreated ninja, "I want you to kick their asses, but remember to go easy on them, kid. Don't worry, I can't afford not to. They're not you after all." Naruto replied with a smirk as he headed towards the mansion. As the boy walked off, Logan thought of how interesting things were going to get that evening. He knew that the only one on the new X-Men team who even came close to Naruto in terms of skill, efficiency and ruthlessness was Laura, and that was only because of her past as an assassin for the Weapon X program. Yet that comparison was like trying to compare a flea to a fully grown lion. All she had were her claws, heightened senses and regeneration abilities to work with. Naruto, on the other hand, wasn't even remotely that limited. Even when put against an entire team of mutant superhero trainees, 4 of whom Logan had taken great pains to make sure Naruto knew as little about as possible so as to keep their abilities a secret, Naruto would still win. Sure, if they worked together and came up with a solid plan they could potentially pull off something impressive, but ultimately Naruto would not lose. All because Logan had asked him to win. Naruto had once said to him that if you want our best, then Jounin are the ninjas for you. However, if you want the job done, then Anbu Black Ops are what you are looking for. It was this mentality to get the job done at any cost that would make him an insurmountable boulder upon which new X-Men's wave of success would break. His wide range of abilities, high intelligence, better training, vast experience in different kinds of combat scenarios, and the fact that he'd survived a war have helped. Even the way Naruto carried himself was designed to look both confident and strategic. It looked casual to the unobservant, but his muscles were coiled like springs, ready to send him off at top speed in any direction at a moment's notice. Whenever they sparred, Naruto had never once come across the various styles of martial arts Wolverine had perfected in his life. Yet he quickly adapted to them and correctly began anticipating and creating the perfect counters for everything Wolverine threw at him. And Wolverine knew a lot, it was quite frankly terrifying. Even his combat doctrine when Wolverine, Colossus and Nightcrawler tag-teamed him was one of using the environment, diversions and exploiting vulnerabilities rather than the direct kind of fighting most superheroes and villains were used to. Smoke bombs, the ninja equivalent of flashbangs, throwing knives and stars, flexible but extremely toughing wires and a tanto were just a few of the many surprises he had up his sleeve, and those didn't require any of his powers. In fact, the only power he had actively used then was his left eye, the Byakugan, which gave him an enormous advantage. In other sparring matches he'd used a lot of his other powers which, while formidable, were not insurmountable. That eye on the other hand allowed him to coordinate even his weakest abilities and chain them together for devastating effect. There was only one other thing more devastating about Naruto than his eye in Logan's opinion, and that was his stamina. The kid recovered too quickly, he had limits to his strength, so it wasn't anywhere near someone like the Hulk. However, even when he ran out of stamina, Naruto would fully recover in minutes, rather than the hours it would take a normal person. It was the single most terrifying thing about Naruto, and one of just a long list of reasons why the new X-Men couldn't win against him. Thankfully they were never meant to win. VVV. So your mentors, the X-Men, are pretty impressed with you guys right now. According to them, surviving an attack by the mutant-hating terrorist organization known as the Purifiers was already pretty impressive. However, you did more than just that, you forced a mutant-killing machine known as Nimrod into retreating. A feat worthy of much praise in itself. Then you rescued one of your own who had been kidnapped and in the process freed me from the evil clutches of the Weapon X program. Perhaps he was beginning to lay it on thick, but with each word 6 of the 7 assembled mutants before him stood a little straighter and were puffed out their chests with pride as they grinned at each other. Sole exception being X-23. Whether this was because Wolverine had cued her in on what was coming or because it simply wasn't in her nature to let her guard down simply cause of some kind and encouraging words was anyone's guess. What Naruto did know was that she was easily the most prepared among that team to fight against him after all stories he told her last night. Or rather, she knew how little of a chance they stood. Sure, he hadn't told her the mechanics behind how he used his powers, aside from that they were fueled by chakra, but she was a clever girl and could create countermeasures based on what he had said. She obviously knew he could manipulate wind, water, fire, lightning, earth, clone himself, use seals, make himself invisible and thousand other things he'd casually mentioned the previous night. Would she inform her team about this? Would she keep it to herself because he told her all of that in confidence? Naruto felt he wouldn't blame Laura if she spilled his secrets to her team to help them battle him. Teamwork was the most emphasized skill among Konoha shinobi and he'd respect her for doing that. However, he'd never trust her again. The mere thought of not being able to trust Laura made him feel strangely ill. I really hope you keep my secrets, Laura. Putting those thoughts aside, Naruto focused on the task ahead and said, "It's due to these specific accomplishments that the 7 of you are currently here this afternoon. The X-Men want to see for themselves whether you, their protégés, are ready for the next step in your training or whether you just got lucky against Nimrod. The fact that this also gives them a chance to assess my own combat abilities in a secure environment is just a bonus. In other words, this afternoon we will all be going through a training exercise together. Will we be doing a simulation together? Did they finally fix the danger room?" Noriko Ishida Surge asked in surprise. Naruto could feel her curiosity towards him and what they were going to be doing. However, none of the new X-Men had picked up on the fact that they wouldn't be on the same team. Might as well spoil the surprise. With a shake of his head, Naruto firmly replied. "Negative. The danger room is still out of commission, so this will be an all-out brawl. Your team versus me." Mercury frowned at this and said, 7-on-1 doesn't seem particularly fair." Her concern for him was born out of gratitude for helping save her from the monsters at the Weapon X facility, both the human and animal ones. Unfortunately, such concerns were also completely misplaced and would lead to her underestimating him. He certainly had no intention of going any easier on any one of them than a Jounin would against group of genin. Sure, some of the kids could take a harsher beating than most Jounin were willing to dish out against the genin in their cells. But then Naruto was no ordinary Jounin, he was an Anbu commander and one of the most powerful shinobi in the history of the elemental nations. This whole exercise was nothing more than an excuse to kick the crap out of the kids and teach them a few valuable life lessons. "I know, right? Your combined strength versus mine is grossly disproportional. I mean, I am not happy about this idea myself." Naruto replied, trailing off in thought for a moment before shaking his head and saying, "Nevertheless, I am shinobi and I will persevere, but that is neither here nor there. With the danger room out of action, we will just have to fight in an empty room with no cover to hide behind. My goal will be to take down all 7 of you by incapacitating you in some way or knocking you out. Your team wins by knocking me out, holding me still for 30 seconds or taking this bell from me." With his explanation complete, Naruto pulled a bell from his pouch and jingled it once in front of everyone before clenching his right fist around it. It would be pointless to keep the bell on his belt in the presence of a telekinetic. And if they could force him to let go of the bell, he would personally be impressed with them. Plus they would win. Naruto would prefer it if of the 3 options to take him out, they went for the bell, cause, well, it looked like it would be an easy target, it wasn't, and it would force them to get very creative, very quickly. Such a situation would also reveal more about their powers and team dynamics. Not that keeping him still for 30 seconds or knocking him out would be any easier for these teens. No matter what they tried, they would be in for a nasty surprise. He had contingencies for everything. The only one who was even remotely ready for what he had to throw at them was X-23, and that was largely because she knew quite a lot more about him than the rest after yesterday's talk. Would she reveal to her team what he told her in private or keep it to herself? Naruto didn't know what to think about that. Of course he wanted her to keep it secret, but he'd also been taught to be loyal to his team, and keeping information that could help your team win to yourself was not right. In the end, he decided it wouldn't matter. Still, the exercise was horribly skewed in his favor, so Naruto decided to throw them a bone, saying, "In addition to everything I just said, I will not be using anything on the sheer level of the powers I demonstrated a week ago at the facility. In other words, no bombs, no energy chains or shields and no localized omniscience. You might regret that. I hear those abilities at Elixir. I am sure I will live," Naruto said as he deliberately dropped a tag with a ceiling array onto the floor and then stepped on it in full view of all of them. He hoped that his actions would garner some kind of suspicion from them, even if he had never shown any of them his various ceiling tags and how they work. A ninja would never ignore something like that, even if they didn't understand it. Unfortunately, this was not a team of ninjas. Instead, Hellion announced loudly, "You're unbelievably cocky, you know that." The kid had remained suspiciously silent up until now. Though the jealousy and anger Naruto was feeling being directed towards him said more than words ever could. "Maybe. But shouldn't you decide something like that after you defeat me, Mr. Keller?" "Well, whatever, you may start when ready," he replied with a mischievous smile. The trap was set and all that was left was for his prey to take the bait. Julian Keller did not fail in this regard. An invisible hand wrapped itself tightly around Naruto as Hellion telekinetically grabbed him and yanked him 10 feet straight up into the air. With a derisive snort he bellowed. "Pathetic. You didn't even try to avoid my telekinesis. How arrogant can you be to just stand there, knowing you face a telekinetic? I can take you down by myself, I just need to hold you there for 30 seconds, right?" As if in response to his words, the paper tag Naruto had stepped on earlier activated on the floor beneath him. It would go off in 5 seconds. No one noticed this, of course, their attention all concentrated on Naruto at the moment, who smirked and simply replied. "Now why would I avoid your telekinesis when it guaranteed you would fall into my little trap? Overconfidence will get you killed, kid. What are you, gay? Hellion and the new X-Men didn't even get the chance to express their confusion when the unassuming paper tag detonated in an eye-searing flash and an ear-wrecking screech that could be felt in their very bones. It was as if 1,000 trains had suddenly and simultaneously activated their brakes, and all that sound was now being blasted into this room. Hellion instantly lost his concentration as instinctively covered his ears to shield them from the awful racket, and his ironclad grip on Naruto failed. It was a mistake and the last mistake he would make in this particular exercise. The screeching came to a sudden stop the instant Naruto's feet hit the floor. To his credit, Hellion valiantly tried to recapture Naruto with his telekinesis. Unfortunately, telekinesis worked at the speed of thought, and the speed of thought was not as fast as people believed, especially when telekinesis was involved. The vast majority of all the photons that entered the eye were lost before they even got to the back of the eye. The 10% or so that made it had to be translated into an electrical current and sent to the visual processing center of the brain and then understood before a reaction could even be considered. By the time that reaction arrived, even if it came the instant the problem was understood and appropriate action was taken, a small amount of time would have passed. For a normal person this would be insignificant, a span of time measured in milliseconds. Barely even noticeable to the majority of the human population. Unfortunately, Naruto wasn't even remotely normal by human or ninja standards. He stood at the peak of what it meant to be a ninja of the elemental nations. Julian literally blinked, and the scarlet-haired ninja who had been clearly on the other side of the room was suddenly standing right beside him, as if he'd teleported. The telekinetic didn't even get to process Naruto's new location before the ex-Anbu operative flicked his left index finger out. The glowing tip covered in green chakra connected with Hellion's temple and pulsed once. Then like a puppet without strings, Julian instantly crumbled to the floor. He was completely out cold. Brett neutralized, 6 more to go. It was barely a mutter, but the whole room heard him. Naruto's voice was devoid of all emotion, and his eyes completely lacked any of the warmth they held before the exercise as he looked down at the fallen boy. With his guard seemingly let down for a second, Naruto almost smiled when in response to his actions, there was a whistle in the air. The sound of an incoming blade parting the air was unmistakable. Naruto had grown intimately familiar with that sound, having caused and heard similar sounds hundreds of thousands of times in his home universe. With a violent jerk of his upper body to the side, twin 11-inch monomolecular blade sliced through the space his neck had previously occupied as X-23 attacked him with lethal intent. It was an impressive assassination attempt, he'd almost not heard her approach. Unfortunately, even without the Byakugan, his other senses were still absurdly superhuman. For a split second the two locked eyes with each other as Naruto's whole body swayed out of the path of her attack and she swept past him. The whole world seemed to just fade into the background, with the only thing remaining being the eyes, their counterpart. Naruto's amethyst and lavender eyes were visible pools of warmth, gratitude and sadness. While Laura's jade orbs held excitement, nervousness and unshakable determination. Laura clearly understood the situation. Between their talk the previous night and what she had seen at the Weapon X facility or heard from Wolverine, she had a pretty good idea of how utterly outmatched she and the new X-Men were against him. Yet, she was determined to give him a good showing. Naruto wanted to smile, he could feel his face trying to stretch out into a happy grin. However, this wasn't the place for that. This was training, a place of preparation for the battlefield. And much like the battlefield, there was no room for his feelings here. But that thought, Naruto's eyes seemed to lose their friendly warmth and light, becoming the cold, almost hollow things that had taken the countless lives on the orders of his nation and his Hokage. Naruto was pleased to note that Laura's eyes quickly began to reflect his own, thanks to her training, and she at least showed no intention of pulling her punches against him. Let the lesson begin. Laura had already impressed him by correctly anticipated that his target would be Hellion and had rushed to the poor boy's aid as fast as she could. Hell, she'd started moving towards him before Naruto had even activated the stun tag. This showed a depth and understanding of battlefield tactics that even Naruto found alarming. However, she'd also made a mistake in all this. She'd come to aid Hellion on her own. When compared to average human or mutant, X-23 was impressively fast, to the point that she could react to bullets after they were fired at her. That wasn't to say that if you opened up on her with SMG or an assault rifle on full auto, she'd dodge every bullet. No, Laura would undoubtedly get hit, and due to her regeneration, more often than not, she wouldn't even bother dodging and simply gut you for having the temerity to shoot in her general direction. That said, her reaction time was easily sufficient to track bullet trajectories mid-flight and react to them. Despite this, X-23 was not an actual speedster, Naruto on the other hand was. He was barely even pushing the limits of his base speed and nowhere close to using his true speeds, which came with the activation of his version 1 chakra cloaks, Sage mode, Kurama chakra mode, 6-path Sage mode, or any combinations of those modes. Yet he had knocked out Julian before most of the new X-Men could even so much as turn their heads to his new location. Worse yet was the fact that for all her experience, strategic mind and skill, X-23 sucked at communication in a combat situation. She had failed to tell her team leader of her plan to assist Hellion and had not asked for backup either. It was the kind of rookie mistake Naruto had punished fully trained Anbu with latrine duty in the Konoha's equivalent of an old people's home. A home specifically geared towards older ninjas. No one said he wasn't a vicious bastard. Naruto liked Laura a lot for a whole list of reasons, primarily the fact that she freed him from 5 weeks of cryostasis and hellish experimentation by his captors. He felt a deep debt of gratitude to her for that one act of kindness, and Naruto was perfectly aware that he was attracted to the girl on multiple levels. Wasn't anything that anyone would even consider remotely strong, but it was an attraction that was undeniably present. He still wouldn't ever go easy on an ally for any reason, especially when they were making a silly mistake. So out of gratitude and a touch of affection for her, Naruto was determined to be harsher towards her than anyone else. And pain was the best teacher for these kinds of lessons. You should have told them your plan and asked for backup instead, foolishly rushing in alone. With his piece said, Naruto performed a spinning sidestep to avoid a modified lunging kick from X-23 that had her foot claw pointed forward and ready to shank him in the liver. He promptly retaliated with his right elbow to her temple, the force of which would have knocked out just about anyone else and at the very least disoriented X-23, despite a regenerative healing. Laura, however, blocked it with the outside of her right forearm and bicep. Yet, the attack still retained enough power to knock her over 2 meters backwards. Not giving her pause to recover, Naruto pursued her with a vicious and extremely precise flurry of jabs and pokes at her various exposed nerve bundles and vital organs. Retracting her claws in response to this, Laura quickly slapped the majority of Naruto's attacks aside, to her left or right. Anything she couldn't redirect or block, she let her healing factor heal. Seconds into their exchange, Laura spotted an opening in Naruto's defense and capitalized on it with 4 consecutive punches aimed at his sternum, neck and face. Naruto blocked the first 3 with contemptuous ease, but as he went to block the 4th punch, his instincts flared and he instead slapped the blow to the side just as Laura's right hand claws shot out mid-punch and nearly skewered his left hand through the palm. Stepping forward in a follow-up movement, Naruto got within Laura's personal space and stomped down hard on her extended right foot. The satisfying crunch of shattered bone would have left anyone else screaming in agony and unable to put weight on that foot for even a second. Laura on the other hand didn't even so much as flinch. Instead, knowing she would simply heal from the damage, X-23 jumped forwards and used the same injured leg to knee Naruto in the face, or at least attempt to do so. With the palm of his right hand, Naruto successfully blocked the knee attack while taking a single step back to give himself room. Gravity reasserted itself and brought Laura back down to earth, where she immediately attacked again. Raising his right leg, which was currently in front of the rest of him, Naruto blocked a low kick from Laura's left foot. With her foot claw extended, the attack would have either severed his knee joint or hamstringed him. Instead, the bottom of his right boot caught her left shin and stopped her attack in its tracks, leaving her somewhat off balance and with all of her weight on her still healing leg. What was once a completely shattered right foot now only had a series of hairline fractures running through the metatarsals and phalanges bones of her foot. Still, with her full body weight under that foot, even X-23 couldn't completely ignore the pain. As a result, for a split second, Laura was unable to suddenly shift her center of balance and react to Naruto's lightning-fast shifts in momentum. The normal human would have had tough time spotting this, let alone taking advantage of such a weakness due to how stubborn Wolverine's clone could be and how fast she healed. Naruto on the other hand thrived on exploiting such opportunities in combat, and he did so here for all it was worth. He might not have enjoyed hurting her, but Naruto was first and foremost a soldier. His feelings and concerns had no place on the battlefield, so redirecting his still extended foot that had blocked Laura's attempted low kick, Naruto drove it into her ribcage. With a sickening snap, Laura's first and second ribs on her left side were shattered with brutal efficiency, forcing a gasp of pain and air from her lungs and out of her mouth. Still, she pushed through it and valiantly swiped at his throat with her left-hand claws. Unfortunately, Naruto extended his own bone claws and skewered Laura's incoming strike mid-swing before it could pick up any momentum. Naruto's claws pierced between her ulna and radius and punched all the way through to the other side in a rather gruesome spurt. His fist essentially keeping her arm stuck in place. Naruto didn't even stop for a second. With his left hand's index and ring fingers, Naruto jabbed at Laura's right shoulder in an impressive imitation of a gentle fist strike and severed the ligaments within. The fact that the gentle fist style did not break the skin made it look like Laura's hand had simply stopped working and flopped to her side uselessly. Naruto then shoved his palm into her sternum and pulsed his chakra once. Both her lungs collapsed as her breath shot out of her mouth explosively. Meanwhile, hidden from view just beneath her breast, a ceiling matrix took form. A jab to the base of her throat instantly shut down her windpipe before 3 jabs specifically targeting the vagus nerve forced Laura into unconsciousness for a few seconds as she reeled in pain and shock from his assault. Naruto then withdrew his claws and punched her with his right hand in the sternum, hard enough to shatter it and send Laura flying. The whole fight hadn't even lasted 10 seconds before Laura was completely incapacitated and flying across the danger room. It had lasted long enough for the new X-Men to get their shit together, but not enough to even have hope to change the result of this exercise. Target down. 5 to go. The utterly emotionless way Naruto said it set everyone's hairs standing. While what he'd done to Hellion had been incredible, it was the way in which he so thoroughly took apart X-23, then drove home the fact that he way beyond their league. Suddenly Naruto was a far more menacing opponent than the new X-Men had first presumed. A miniature sandstorm bloomed around Naruto as one of the mutants he was still unfamiliar with on personal level turned to sand and encircled him to cut off any escape. Soraya Kataraka Dust, if he recalled correctly, had an impressive ability and was using it rather skillfully. It reminded him of a cross between Gaara's Sand Control Hizuki clan's bloodline limit that allowed its members to transform into water and back into flesh. Naruto could tell just by looking that at the speeder sand was revolving around him, it would shred his skin and flesh from his bones if he touched it. Soraya's sand form also had the benefit of cutting off his vision of the rest of her teammates and blocking his hearing thanks to the roar her sand generated as the individual grains rubbed against each other. Normally he would simply track everyone with his Byakugan and various other sensory abilities right through the obstruction, but he had promised the senior X-Men to go easy on the kids. This wouldn't even be worth calling a training exercise if he brought in something as overpowered as the Byakugan into the equation. Even the use of his bastardized version of Gentle Fist he'd learned from Hinata and used on Laura was pushing it. Localized visual omniscience was way too much of a cheat to be used against such low-level opponents. Not even Kakashi-sensei was ever that cruel. Instead, Naruto fell back on older well-tested tricks he'd learned from sparring with his friend the 5th Kazekage, who had similar abilities. It would have been a simple matter for Naruto to inhale deeply, flash through the one-handed equivalent of the tiger, ox, dog, rabbit and snake-hand seals before turning in the general direction the rest of the teenage mutants muttering wind release. Great breakthrough. As he exhaled. That wind release technique would have been more than sufficiently powerful for the task of blowing apart Soraya's sand. However, using something like that was quite a bit above the level he felt was necessary for dealing with dust. For each person he had faced so far and those he was going to face, there was a specific strategy tailored to taking them down that targeted a weakness in their abilities or thought process. For Hellion, it was his overconfidence in his telekinesis. Thus, Naruto disrupted his concentration and attacked him faster than his mind could process. For Laura, it was her failure to communicate to her team about her plan of attack and her confidence in her regenerative ability. Thus he had rapidly overwhelmed her and incapacitated her in such a way that she was permanently sidelined. Not that she knew this yet. For Dust, who could shift herself freely from human form into a form composed of sand and move like a miniature dust storm. She was doing exactly what she was supposed to do. Where Laura and Julian were powerful but making mistakes by going off on their own, Soraya was acting as a smokescreen to keep her team hidden, keeping him locked down in one position. Whether her actions were based on teamwork or not was entirely up for debate, but Naruto approved of her actions. If she had a single weakness though, it was her hesitation to try and shred him with her wall of sand that was circling him like a tiny cyclone. Even if she didn't want to shred his flesh from his bones with her sand, if Dust used her sand to converge on his position and wrap around him, it could potentially immobilize him like Gaara was so fond of doing. Too bad she didn't think of something like that. He'd still probably pass her. However, this didn't mean he would go easy on her, for while he did not use the wind release. Great breakthrough technique on her, he didn't need to in the first place. All he really required was an outwardly expanding shockwave with him as it centered to break through Dust's wall of razor-sharp winds and scatter her all over the danger room. And what was better at creating shockwaves than explosives? Dipping his left hand into his ninja tools pouch, he pulled out half a dozen explosive tags and threw them at Dust's revolving sand. The fact that the explosive seals were drawn open paper tags helped greatly when the tags got caught in air currents created by the rapidly oscillating sand and spread out evenly. With a one-handed ram sign, Naruto pulsed his chakra and activated the seals while jumping straight upwards to the ceiling. The only one who knew he could stick himself to walls and ceilings was Laura, and she was incapacitated currently. Saraya Katter had no time to even react to the explosion as she found her sand form scattered all around the danger room from the explosion and its shockwave. The explosion had glassed a few bits of her sand, and the shockwave had hit with enough force that had she been her human form, it would have killed her instantly. Seeing as she was still alive, it had merely battered her pretty badly and forced her to resume her human form. Only one problem though, she had lost her burqa again and left in nothing more than her sports bra and panties. Luckily the smoke and dust from the explosion concealed her nakedness, but this would last. As for the others, the shockwave was so forceful that it toppled everyone still standing except Rockslide. Naruto dropped from the ceiling and landed directly in front of Dust, who did her best to conceal her half-naked form. Her state of dress did not bother Naruto, and in his opinion, it should not have bothered Saraya, especially if she wanted to walk the path of hero. However, in the past week, he had studied up on the various old and modern religions of Earth, and in doing so he had learned that it was polite to respect and show tolerance to those of a different belief than your own. Personally, he didn't even understand why everyone was so worked up about other people not believing in the same gods themselves, and it was one of the stupider reasons for going to war than he learned about in this humanity's history. However, Naruto did like the Jesus character. He had a really cool attitude and way of looking at life. Unlike Kagaya and those Otsutsuki bastards. So out of respect for Saraya's religious beliefs, Naruto turned his head to the side while using his chakra to make a hooded cloak she could cover herself in and a plain Anbu mask with no descriptive feature and only large eye holes to keep her face hidden. Saraya quickly donned the clothing Naruto had provided for her, clothing that despite being made out of his chakra was just like normal clothing, and said, "Thank you." Sensing her embarrassment disappear, Naruto turned to look at the young woman and said, "Don't mention it. However, consider that cloak the same as your surrender. You can of course continue fighting if you wish, but if you somehow did manage to defeat me, that cloak would definitely disappear. Plus, after taking an explosion towel everywhere, I think you need a rest. Don't worry, you did really well." She mumbled with nod of understand. "Target down, 4 to go then," Naruto said with surprising warmth in his voice this time. He would have even smiled at Saraya, but he had to suddenly duck as with loud roar Rockslide launched. Naruto mentally stumbled as he tried to process what he was seeing. Is that Santo Vakaro's own right arm he just threw at me? Naruto wondered even as he sprinted towards the living rock golem at would have been considered an impressive speed in the eyes of the new X-Men. Withdrawing a kunai with an explosive tags attached to it from his ninja pouch and 2 more loose explosive tags, he then prepared to engage Rockslide from a distance. The mutant in question did not ignore the speed with which Naruto charged straight at him and prepared to pummel the retreated ninja. Spreading his legs apart, he raised left arm with careful aim and when Naruto was 7 meters away, blasted his other arm off in a literal rocket punch in hopes of catching Naruto by surprise. Instead of shock or panic, Naruto's eyes merely widened by a fraction as they adjusted to the unique attack. In response, there was a bang, and an explosive kunai lodged itself Rockslide's granite chest with enough force that it sent him staggering backwards. But that was just the beginning of the rock mutant's misery as he was introduced to the Naruto Uzumaki school of pain. Half-second later and Naruto was less than 5 meters away from the stone giant. Palming one of his loose explosive tags in each hand, he increased his speed significantly so that time slowed to a crawl around him. At 3 meters from Rockslide, he easily slid to the floor right under Rockslide's flying detached fist as it slowly flew overhead, then making the half-ram seal. Naruto pulsed his chakra once and activated explosive kunai still lodged in Rockslide's chests. Just for shits and giggles, Naruto allowed himself to slide between Rockslide's legs for a distance of 5 meters before slapping both explosive tags onto the floor behind him, face upwards. The explosive kunai was already in the process of detonating on Rockslide's chest. He did this, but Naruto wasn't worried about the Santo. If nothing else, the teen was durable, this would hurt for him, but more like decent beating than taking an explosion to the face. Running straight up the wall till he was on the roof of the danger room, Naruto simply stopped in place via chakra to his feet and waited for the magic to begin. This was going to look good in the recordings when he watched them later with Wolverine. Though the grouchy bastard might try to stab me for what I did to Laura earlier. I placed that seal awfully close to her breasts. Boom. All things considered, it was not nearly the most dangerous explosive tag he could have used. Hell, this one was the same type used in Anbu training exercises. Powerful enough to fuck you up if you got caught in its explosion, but weak enough that it wouldn't kill you. It was designed to throw an opponent via the shockwave it generated rather than outright kill you. It was still really painful though. Rockslide got to experience this firsthand when the tag in the center of his chest exploded and threw him backwards a clear 5 meters and would have gone a lot further had his body not passed over the 2 tags Naruto placed on the floor behind. Instead, the first tag served merely to push him into the area of effect of the next 2 tags, and seeing as his feet were clearly off the ground when the second set of tags which were not training tags exploded. Boom. That was what a real explosive tag sounded like. Sure, the armless Rockslide wasn't blown to bits, but then that wasn't Naruto's intention. He wasn't trying to kill poor mutant, just hurt him a little. Which was why as Rockslide found himself propelled 30 meters into the air and Naruto smiled and dropped from the roof to give him a few love taps. Or to be more precise, a really good kick. Whoever said that Rock was inviolable, well, Santo Vicaro's face would have easily disagreed them as Naruto kick left a spiderweb of cracks and boot print on his left cheek. An action that spun the living golem's body around so that he could better grab one off Rockslide's legs before Naruto twisted harshly and began whipping the mutant around in midair like a gigantic flail. After reaching a satisfying speed in seconds, Naruto released Rockslide before casually reorienting himself for a silent landing. It would be a moment that all the remaining new X-Men would always remember as Rockslide helplessly careened through the air towards Mercury, who was still disoriented from all the explosions. With literally no time to dodge or prepare herself, the rock mutant smashed into the girl made of living mercury really hard and made her quite literally go splat. As for the rock mutant himself, he was already immobilized by sealing matrix Naruto had placed on him before throwing him at Mercury. It adhered him to the floor as if he had been covered in super glue or something. He would not be getting up again. Target down, 3 to go. Naruto spoke as he soundlessly alighted onto the floor. He then paused for a moment as he looked Elixir and sighed, saying, "Make that 2 to go." Favoring the golden-skinned boy with a pitying look as he tried and failed to use his ability, which apparently was some kind of healing to push out the chakra Naruto had left inside X-23 body to restrain her. His chakra was slowing her regeneration to a crawl, and if Josh Foley could have pushed any more out, she would have been back in the fight and easily become the most difficult of the group to put down. Unfortunately for Elixir, well, the fact that his healing ability could even affect Naruto's chakra was surprising to the ninja. That tactic he'd used was not. The golden-skinned boy should have known better than to carelessly touch the body of someone that had been taken down by a shinobi, ally or not. It was a basic ninja principle taught to all medic nin. You should be more careful when attending to your patients on the battlefield, healer. Especially when you don't know the exact details of how they were taken down. Who knows what kid of surprises you might unleash. His words seemed to be carried on the wind itself as they reached Josh Foley and making him look up in shock. However, it was already too late. The sealing matrix on X-23 chest cough definitely chest glowed a malevolent red and activated. Red kanji markings and other indistinguishable symbols burst forth from it and crawled their way up Elixir's body before wrapping around him tightly. The healer found himself utterly unable to move or speak after that. As I said, target down, 2 to go. You bastard. Both her angry roar and the blast of electrical energy gave away Nariko's position as Naruto tilted his head out of the way. Like her name indicated, her powers surged forth in arcs of lightning towards Naruto, who merely replaced himself with one of Rockslide's discarded arms for the hell of it. He could have just as easily sidestepped the attack by moving 37 centimeters to the left. Her name is obviously a giveaway of her abilities. Even so, her attack is not bad. It looks like a cross between the lightning release, false darkness and electromagnetic murder techniques. Which means her powers are more like real lightning, and I was correct to substitute myself instead of dodging it. Lightning always takes the path of least resistance, which in this case would have been straight into me had I remained in the attack's vicinity. In that case, the best place to be is over there. I might as well get this over with. Naruto thought as he made a beeline towards Rockslide's down form and the quickly reforming Mercury. Come back here, bastard, and take your punishment like a man. Surge yelled as she chazzed after him at incredible speeds, using her electricity to boost herself in a similar way to the fourth Raikage, albeit on a much lower level. Still, she was a heck of a lot faster than he expected, just not nearly fast enough to gain on Naruto, unless he let her. He was however surprised when Surge, for all her angry screaming, moved to his flank and fired her next blast of electrical energy at him from there so as not to accidentally hit the various blobs that were Mercury with her electrical discharges. While it was pretty blatantly obvious to anyone truly looking that he was trying to create a friendly fire scenario, Naruto was secretly relieved that Surge cared enough to consider her teammates' positions even when she angry. This was a simple test for the team leader, one she passed. Surge was clearly angry that he had taken out most of her team in under a minute and a half, but not to the point where she would have been so lost in her anger as to carelessly zap Mercury in her attempt to get him. If she had done that, he would have ended the exercise in an instant, failed her. However, even when gunning for him, she seemed to have enough self-control to consider the positions of her allies. On top of that, her usage of her powers to both move around and quickly and fire in arcing beams was pretty decent. Especially when Mercury suddenly reassembled herself and launched herself at Naruto with inhuman speed while he was blinded by the brilliance of Surge's attack. How naive. A ninja ducked under a decapitating swipe from Mercury even as Surge sprang forward with her speed while keeping a concentration of her power around her gauntlets, which were clenched in fists. She apparently intended to physically punch him while simultaneously electrocuting him. Good plan, good timing, wrong person to try it on. Throwing himself into a side flip over Surge's attack, Naruto sidestepped Mercury's second attack, which once again utilized Surge's attack as a distraction. Then raising his hand, he caught Surge's electrified fists and while still holding it, drove his right foot into Mercury's gut as she came in for another attack. Lightning that should have electrocuted Naruto as he held onto Surge's gauntlet was safely streamed through his body and out his foot into Mercury. The shock of all that electricity suddenly running through her system tore a scream of surprise from the metal girl's throat as she found herself unable to move. Playing possum, as it's called on Earth, isn't a bad idea. Unfortunately, ninjas are hell of lot better at it. Your thinking is correct, Mercury. Using the brightness of Surge's attacks to distract me, timing your attacks so that one of you is always attacking me from different directions and angles, but never at the same time. Even pretending to reform so that you could surprise me when I got close enough was a good idea. This is the first show of any kind of teamwork I've seen so far today. I approve, Naruto said with a cheerful smile before retracting his foot and letting her collapse to the floor as he shoulder-checked Surge away from. However, if you are going to use Surge's bright electrical beams as a distraction to strike your opponent, then remember that you are pretty shiny yourself. And for Kami's sake, learn to run a little more quietly. All the girl could do was whimper in surprise as she struggled to get her body back under control. Naruto ignored this and merely turned to Surge and saying, "As for you. Nice try with the pincer maneuver, you and Mercury have good teamwork." Her inorganic biology also meant that she can move at speeds and in ways that humans could never even dream of. It's both impressive and useful that she could match your own speed even if momentarily. Loved your coordination, however your simplistic usage of your powers leaves a lot wanting. For example, why don't you try shape your powers like this? Chidori. Senbon. The burst blue electrical energy surrounded Naruto's hand before changing shape into needles of lightning as he casually swung it in Mercury direction just as she began to get up, sending her into another set of electrical spasms. Jaya. Surge actually flinched as she heard her teammates scream and convulse on the floor behind him but kept a level head and instead asked, "You have electrical powers too? Fishing for intelligence, I see. My power is a weaponized version of life itself, but for simplicity's sake, let's just say, yes." With a single leap backwards, he landed beside Mercury and stretched out his hand so that it flared with lightning chakra once more. But this time the chakra shifted wildly in Naruto's hands as he said, "I can do this too. Chidori." Spear. Condensed lightning elongated into what Nariko Ishida could only call a lightsaber before growing even longer into what was undoubtedly a spear. Using his training in Bijutsu under the Sandaime Hokage and when the old man had some spare time, Naruto swung the Chidori spear around in an intricate and artistic pattern that actually left all those watching mesmerized for a second before bringing it to a stop just above Mercury's stomach and saying, "I would consider surrendering at this point. Your entire team is out for the count and Mercury is my hostage now. On top that, there is no possible version of this fight in which you can win. You can either walk away from this having gracefully surrendered knowing you were utterly outmatched, or I can stab Mercury so she doesn't interfere, then kick your ass up and down till I get bored and end this fight anyway. What will it be?" "I surrender." "Good choice. A leader should always know when to surrender and when to fight. I am really relieved you didn't make me stab Mercury too." With his piece said, Naruto snapped his fingers for dramatic effect and cancelled the seals on X-23, Rock Slide and Elixir so that the healer could wake up the down team of new X-Men. His job was done and he'd fulfilled Wolverine's request, hopefully to the man's satisfaction. Now where could he get some ramen before they reviewed the team's performance? DBC. What if Naruto X Marvel harem and Marvel Universe end here, and thanks for watching my video till the end.